Hey guys! Tonight, we arrived just in time for sunset at one of the most dreamlike places on Earth, Angkor Wat, the ancient Khmer temple so massive it used to be called the world's largest religious monument. Right now, you're not walking in as a tourist with a water bottle and a tour guide named Chen. No, you're arriving like a weary temple guardian returning for the night shift, where everything creaks with age and even the air smells like old incense, dust, and deep time. The sandstone is warm beneath your bare feet, and the jungle is starting to stretch its long green arms as the sun folds behind the canopy. But don't get too comfortable, because let's be honest, if you were actually living in 12th century Cambodia, there's a high chance you wouldn't survive the night. Malaria, tigers, rival dynasties, or maybe even a poorly timed opinion about the wrong deity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and your local time in the comments. Let's see how far Angkor's echoes travel tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as the sun begins its final descent, a molten yolk dripping behind the tangled trees. The air grows heavy, not quite hot, but still sticky in that way tropical evenings always are. You trudge forward slowly, taking the same path thousands of others have trodden, from laborers to lords to lost explorers. Each footstep clicks against flagstones that have seen more wars than treaties and more monks than maps. Your legs feel heavy, and it's not just the imaginary armor. To your left, the great moat of Angkor Wat spreads wide and still, catching the orange sky in its reflection. It looks peaceful, but you'd be wrong to assume it always was. Back in the day, crocodiles swam here, real ones, not just metaphorical monsters. Guards had to cross narrow bridges while keeping a careful eye on both rebels and reptiles. Imagine showing up late for duty because your spear got stuck in a crocodile's grin. Unsurprisingly, punctuality mattered less once your legs were involved. Still, the structure looms with serene majesty. Angkor Wat isn't a place that shouts for your attention. It hums, low, constant, and steady. You don't hear it so much as feel it, beneath your skin, in your ribs, vibrating with the rhythm of hundreds of years' worth of prayers. Historians still argue whether the original builders intended this as a Hindu temple to Vishnu or if it gradually morphed into a Buddhist sanctuary. The answer? Both or neither, or whatever the guy in charge needed to keep the stone carvers busy and the gods satisfied.
You keep walking, stepping carefully over stones worn slick by time and tropical rain. Moss fingers up between the cracks, reaching lazily for your toes. As you pass under the first tower arch, bats flitter out in slow arcs, just beginning their nightly loop-de-loops. You're not scared, just mildly startled, in that way that would have made your companion laugh if they hadn't abandoned you 3 doorways ago to chase a glow bug that turned out to be a cursed firefly. Or maybe just a regular one. Who can say? The central towers stand like giant lotus buds, waiting to bloom under starlight. They were built to echo Mount Meru, the center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. That's right, you're walking into a temple designed to be the cosmic axis. No pressure, just mind your head on that low lintel. You rub your forehead. Too late. The stones themselves feel alive. The closer you get to the heart of the temple, the warmer they seem. Not hot like a sun-baked rock, but warm like an oven that was recently used to bake something holy. You imagine the thousands of hands that smoothed these surfaces, some calloused, some delicate, some trembling with devotion, some just trying to finish before the monsoon season hit. Mainstream historical records tell us the construction began under King Suryavarman II in the early 12th century. He supposedly ruled over an empire so large it stretched from the coast of Vietnam to the edges of modern-day Thailand. And yet, despite all that power, he still wanted a temple. A really, really big one. Which tells you something about both ambition and insecurity. Maybe he figured that if his kingdom didn't survive, the sandstone might. Spoiler, the sandstone definitely won. You pause under a carved column, running your fingers along the bas-relief. The figures are dancing. No, not really moving, but the way the lines curve and twirl, you'd swear their hips are mid-motion. These are the Apsaras, celestial dancers, often mistaken for mere decorations, but actually a major feature of the temple's spiritual architecture. Each one has a different headdress, each one a different pose. One of them is missing her nose. You quietly apologize to her anyway. Behind you, the jungle settles into its nighttime rhythm. Crickets start up their string section, frogs handle the percussion, and somewhere deep in the underbrush, something rustles that may or may not be mythological. You turn. Nothing's there. Classic Angkor. Funny thing is, for a site this massive, it's always had a weird habit of vanishing. Not in the physical sense, but culturally. There were long stretches where Angkor was barely mentioned in foreign texts, as if it had vanished into the trees. When French explorers discovered it in the 19th century, cue sarcastic air quotes, it had already been continuously used by locals for generations. But of course, it didn't count until Europeans saw it and said, "Ah, yes, a ruin."
You find yourself stepping through a passageway carved so perfectly square, you wonder what tools they even used. No one knows exactly how the massive stones were lifted into place, though modern theories involve clever systems of ramps, counterweights, elephants, and quite possibly several hundred exhausted teenagers. One fringe theory, unproven but persistent, suggests they used sound vibrations to move stones. Sonic levitation. You chuckle, then pause. That lintel really did hum when you bumped it. The evening deepens, shadows stretch longer, no longer soft but defined. Somewhere ahead, a faint torch glow flickers. Not real fire, just a trick of the light on wet stone. You walk toward it anyway, because that's what you do in dreams. And this already feels like one. You brush past the dangling vine and a swarm of tiny insects who are apparently also temple guardians, judging by how enthusiastically they explore your face. You blink them away, step forward, and suddenly find yourself standing in an open courtyard. The last rays of the sun kiss the top of the temple spires, painting them in amber, then crimson, then violet. It's a light show that hasn't changed in centuries. Nature's version of staying on brand. You stand there, not quite knowing why you stopped. The air seems to hold its breath. For a moment, you think you hear chanting, low, rhythmic, like monks mumbling in a parallel timeline. You squint, but no one's there. Just a patch of sandstone, a heap of old offerings, flowers turned to straw, incense long gone cold, and a curious little lizard sunbathing on a deity's eyebrow. And just like that, night falls. The light fades quickly in Angkor. One moment you're squinting against the glare of a coral-tinted sky, and the next you're enveloped in the thick blue hush of twilight. It's not total darkness yet, more like the kind of dusky in-between that tricks your eyes into thinking things are moving when they're not. Or maybe they are, and your eyes just haven't caught up. You find yourself drifting toward the outer moat again, almost unconsciously. There's something magnetic about the stillness of it. By daylight, the water is a mirror, reflecting the towers in such crisp detail that poets once said the temple had a twin that lived upside down beneath the surface. But now, under a rising moon, that mirror distorts. The ripples dance lazily, casting back long, broken streaks of light
that shimmer like ghosts learning how to walk. The moon climbs slow and sure, round and bright like a royal seal stamped onto the sky. It hovers just above the treetops, lighting the jungle canopy in silver. The air cools slightly, and with it comes the mist, rolling in from the water's surface like a sleepy creature stretching across the temple grounds. You step closer to the edge of the moat and notice small splashes in the distance. Frogs, maybe, or something watching the watchers. A thin chorus begins, soft at first. It's the frogs, indeed, throaty and rhythmic, as if trained by an unseen conductor. You begin to notice their chant follows a pattern, a kind of slow, hypnotic percussion that wouldn't be out of place in a minimalist meditation track. One of them hits a high note unexpectedly, and you pause. It's off-key, but it adds character. You smile. Nature's choir has no auditions. You sit on a low stone ledge near the water. It's warm, still holding the day's heat, and it feels almost polite about it. You lean back, looking across the calm expanse of the moat. Fireflies blink here and there, lazily scribbling their cursive names into the night air. A breeze carries the scent of damp earth, moss, and something faintly sweet, perhaps fallen frangipani petals crushed underfoot. It's easy to forget in moments like this that Angkor Wat was once alive with activity, not just the spiritual chants of monks, but the daily rhythm of an empire. Market vendors peddling sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, palace scribes hurrying past with scrolls tucked under their arms, children chasing each other with reed toys, and of course, guards, lots of guards, watching, standing, listening for rebellion, invasion, or gossip, all while pretending not to be terrified of mosquitoes.
Historians still debate how many people actually lived in and around the Angkor complex. Estimates range from a few thousand elite residents to nearly 1 million across the greater metropolitan zone. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, depending on how generous you're feeling with your definitions of resident. Some say the temples weren't meant to be lived in at all, just maintained, visited, and revered like cosmic post offices for gods. But again, no one really agrees. You notice, just across the water, the faint silhouette of 2 monkeys scampering along a ledge. They move like tiny shadows with tails. One stops to scratch itself. The other seems intent on a crumb or seed or speck invisible to you. Then they vanish into the fronds without so much as a squeak. That's the thing about Angkor Wat. Everything's present, but nothing stays. You decide to follow the curve of the moat a little further, your footsteps muffled by the grass. With every step, the moon glints off the water in a different way, like it's winking at you in a secret code. If you knew ancient Khmer astronomy, maybe you could decode it. Turns out, the temple is aligned with some impressive precision, built to mimic the motion of celestial bodies. The Western orientation, for example, still baffles scholars. Most Hindu temples face east, but Angkor Wat faces west, toward the setting sun. Some say it was a funerary temple for King Suryavarman II, meant to welcome his soul as it followed the sun into the next world. Others think it's an homage to Vishnu, who was often associated with the West. Or maybe the builders just liked sunsets. You stop at a moss-covered platform. Something about the stone invites you to sit again. You do. Across the moat, the towers of Angkor Wat look taller under moonlight, almost watchful, like they're rising up to listen. You think of the people who once gathered here, maybe for festivals, maybe for rituals, maybe just to admire the architecture while sneaking bites of roasted taro. And then, faintly, you hear a sound that isn't frogs. It's low, rhythmic, not a chant exactly, but more like humming, coming from deep within the temple. You strain your ears. Could be the wind through the corridors, could be your imagination, or it could be the night shift. You know, the guardians. Now let's be clear, these aren't your standard security guards with radios and flashlights. These are the temple guardians, a blurry category that blends the sacred and the supernatural. Some believe they were monks selected for their spiritual clarity. Others say they were warrior priests, trained in both scripture and spear. And then there are stories passed down in soft, cracked voices about guardians who were not entirely human, or perhaps not entirely alive.
A fringe theory, one that gets you laughed out of academic symposiums, suggests that some of the statues in the outer corridors were animated at night to guard the sanctum. Eyes would glow, joints would move, and they'd shuffle through the halls with the creak of stone against stone. The idea was that the temple didn't need humans to protect it, it could protect itself. You chuckle, not because you believe it, but because right now, with the way the moon hits the stone and the mist curls like breath, it doesn't feel entirely implausible. You glance behind you, half expecting to see a sandstone lion blinking. It doesn't, of course, but it does look particularly smug. You return your gaze to the water. The chanting frogs are reaching a kind of crescendo now, their song rising and falling in slow, hypnotic waves. It's a lullaby in a language you don't understand, but your body does. Your shoulders soften, your breath slows, the night feels like a blanket. For a while, you just sit there. No story, no mission, just moonlight, mist, frogs, and the occasional whisper of wind. The kind of quiet that feels earned, not empty, but full of resting things. And then, from somewhere deep within the temple, a bell sounds. It's small, clear, one note, and then nothing. You rise slowly, your legs stiff but cooperative. You're not sure why, but the sound feels like a summons, a gentle invitation, not a command, as if someone inside just made tea and hoped you'd join. You begin walking back toward the central causeway, the main bridge that spans the moat and leads directly into the temple's embrace. The bridge is wide, flanked by the famous Naga balustrades, multi-headed serpents carved in stone. Their bodies coil along the sides, undulating like frozen waves. You walk between them, your hands trailing lightly along their backs. In Khmer mythology, Nagas were guardians of treasures, both material and spiritual. They were also thought to be ancestors, linked to the origins of the Khmer people through the legendary marriage of a Naga princess and a human prince. You, of course, weren't invited to that wedding, but the bloodline? Still debatable. Some carvings show the churning of the ocean of milk, a myth where gods and demons tug on a giant Naga to stir the sea and extract the nectar of immortality. You wonder if the Nagas ever get tired of being pulled. They don't complain. Stone seldom does. As you reach the end of the bridge, the temple looms again, taller now, darker, but somehow more inviting. The gate yawns open like a sleepy mouth, waiting to exhale centuries into your ears. You step through. Inside the outer wall, the air thickens, not in a menacing way, but as if the temple were holding its breath. The moment you step through the gateway, you sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Everything feels a few degrees quieter. You can still hear the frogs back at the moat, but they seem distant now, like they're croaking from a dream you've almost forgotten. Even your footsteps become gentler, muffled by moss and centuries of reverent silence. The moonlight spills unevenly into the corridor ahead, filtered through ancient archways and partially collapsed vaults. It bathes the sandstone floor in silvery puddles. You tread carefully, as if not to disturb the geometry. The stones beneath your feet are worn smooth, worn by barefoot pilgrims, sandal-clad monks, and probably the occasional disoriented jungle creature looking for a dry place to nap. Every surface in this corridor is covered in carvings. Bas-reliefs stretch out like murals for giants, depicting battles, rituals, celestial beings, and obscure mythological tangents that no one entirely agrees on. Your fingers trace a line along one figure's outstretched arm. He's frozen mid-sprint, mid-shout, mid someone's attempt at divine storytelling. His expression is determined? Afraid? maybe just badly preserved. It's hard to read stone after a few hundred monsoons. You pause beside one scene where warriors charge into battle, spears raised, elephants in mid-trample. There's a strange tension in the stone. These aren't just decorations, they're frozen intentions. It's as if the original sculptor still lingers, clinging to each groove. One fringe theory argues that Khmer artisans carved these reliefs not just for aesthetics, but as spiritual storage, vessels for memory and intent. Kind of like USB drives, if USB drives also required incense offerings and occasional animal sacrifices. You keep walking, and slowly the warmth of the stone becomes noticeable. It's not hot, just alive. The walls radiate a slow, sleepy heat, as if the temple is gently exhaling. Some scholars believe the sandstone used in Angkor was intentionally chosen for its thermal properties, allowing it to hold heat through the night. Others claim it was simply the most available material and the builders were more practical than poetic. But when you run your hand along the inner surface of a pillar and feel a subtle pulse of warmth, practicality doesn't seem like the most compelling explanation.
The scent inside is impossible to describe with precision. It's not musty like a cellar, nor fresh like a forest. It's somewhere in between, a cocktail of lichen, dust, and something faintly floral. Perhaps the residue of ancient incense. Or maybe the flowers that still find their way here, tucked between stones by unknown hands. You spot a few now, wilted garlands, frangipani petals turning brown at the edges, offerings from earlier in the day still clinging to their purpose. You find yourself stepping into a wide hallway, a cruciform terrace, they call it in the guidebooks, but this isn't a place that welcomes terminology. It wants you to feel, not label. The ceiling rises higher here, arched and ribbed, casting long shadows that quiver gently in the moonlight. The floor dips slightly, and rainwater has gathered in the corners, forming small reflective pools. You catch your own reflection in one and don't recognize the face. It's not a scary moment, just one of those half-awake instances where your identity feels optional. As you walk, you begin to notice sounds again. Not the frogs this time, nor any echoing bell. Just the quiet hiss of wind brushing against stone. It slides through cracks in the architecture like a sleepy whisper. It seems to say, "Not yet," though you're not sure what that refers to. You pause near a carved window, an open grid of stone that lets the breeze through. Outside, the jungle is silver and unmoving, but inside, things feel more fluid. The shadows shift slightly, almost in sync with your thoughts. Not spooky, just responsive. You get the sense the temple is listening, not judging. It's heard everything before. You take a few more steps and then stop again. Not because something catches your eye, but because you feel watched. Not menacingly, more like how a librarian watches you when you touch a rare manuscript. You glance around. To your left, an Apsara. She's dancing, eternally mid-step, carved into the stone wall with meticulous grace. Her hips curve gently, her arms twist like vines, and her eyes, half-lidded, seem to follow you without moving. You stare back, unsure who blinked first. Some of the Apsaras in Angkor are said to be based on real women, court dancers perhaps, or royal consorts. Their names are lost to time, but their poses remain. A few have inscriptions near them, now weathered into unreadability. One was once thought to be laughing, but that interpretation changed after restoration revealed it was just a crack through the cheek. Still, it's hard to shake the sense of humor baked into these figures. They're too elegant, too poised, and just a little too self-aware. You wouldn't be surprised if one of them quietly whispered, "Nice sandals," as you passed. Mainstream historians agree that these carvings were created during the height of the Khmer Empire's artistic golden age, roughly between the 12th and 13th centuries. Some of the techniques are so refined, like how shallow shading gives the illusion of depth, that restoration artists today still struggle to replicate them. One restorer reportedly spent 6 weeks trying to match a single Apsara's smile, only to give up and call it divinely irritating. There's also a lingering debate over who carved them. Some suggest teams of specialized sculptors with years of training. Others claim the finest figures were done by a single master artisan, traveling from temple to temple like a rock star stonecutter. No one knows his name. Some say that's how he wanted it. You move on, not entirely sure how long you've been walking. Time doesn't behave normally here. It stretches and folds like cloth. You could have been wandering for minutes or hours. Your feet aren't tired, but they are obediently slow. It feels like you're inside a lullaby. Suddenly, your path bends around a collapsed corner. A fig tree has broken through the stone, roots crawling down the wall like patient tentacles. Its trunk is thick, weathered, and oddly maternal. You rest your hand against it, half expecting it to pulse beneath your touch. It doesn't, but the bark feels oddly familiar, like something you've leaned against in a forgotten childhood memory. Just beyond the tree, the corridor opens into another chamber, this one darker, quieter, and cooler. The shift in temperature is immediate. You exhale without realizing you were holding your breath. In the center of the room, lit only by moonlight, pouring through a high slit in the ceiling, stands a pedestal. It's empty, but the way it's lit, the way the floor tilts slightly toward it, the way the shadows spiral around its base, you know something important used to rest there. A statue, probably. Maybe a Vishnu, or Buddha, or some hybrid deity whose name got lost in a palace fire and now lives only in whispered folklore. One old monk reportedly claimed the statue here used to sing, not metaphorically, literally sing, low, droning hymns in a language no one recognized. Naturally, no recordings exist, just stories passed down by caretakers who swore it happened, and skeptics who rolled their eyes until they visited and felt their skin prickle for no good reason. You walk around the pedestal, slow and reverent. Something about it feels like the epicenter, not of the temple necessarily, but of this moment. You resist the urge to sit on it, not because you fear punishment, but because it would feel like trying to wear someone else's crown. You let it be. A soft creak behind you. You turn. Nothing there. Of course not. You exhale again, shoulders relaxing. You give the pedestal a little nod, like you're thanking it for existing. It doesn't respond, which is polite of it. Then you keep walking.
You don't remember turning, but somehow you find yourself heading back toward the outer gallery. The corridor narrows here, subtly, and the walls feel closer, like the temple is guiding you gently along a predetermined path. The air is thicker, slightly scented, and you're sure now it isn't just dust. It's the perfume of worn incense trapped in the pores of the stone, a quiet trace of rituals repeated for generations. You breathe in and feel older. Your footsteps echo faintly off the walls, and then you hear it, just ahead, just around the bend, a sound like gravel shifting underfoot. You freeze. Wait. But it doesn't come again. You peek around the corner and, of course, there's no one there. Just a long corridor bathed in moonlight stripes, as if someone laid silver ribbons on the floor. And then you see them. Stone lions. They flank the gallery entrance like sleepy sentinels, one on either side, mouths agape, teeth exposed in what might be a snarl or a grin depending on how optimistic you're feeling. You stop just in front of the left one, inspecting the chipped teeth, the weathered jawline, the moss creeping up its haunch. It's not a small statue. about waist high, though it probably stood taller when it still had its plinth intact. It has the same stoic expression as a cat, waiting for someone to do something foolish. These lions, or singha, as they're called in Khmer tradition, were protectors, not just from physical invaders, but from spiritual threats, misfortune, wandering demons, or nosy tourists. You stare into its stone eyes and wonder how many sunrises it's watched, how many bats have perched on its head, how many quiet offerings have been left beneath its paws. You crouch down and notice scratch marks, tiny grooves near the base, too rough to be ancient carvings, too deliberate to be accidents. Possibly the idle work of a bored soldier or a novice monk waiting out a sermon. The temple holds not just history, but boredom, after all. It's an underrated kind of sacredness. Historians still argue whether these lions had any actual symbolic consistency, or if they were more like a branding choice, an imperial logo scattered across the empire for continuity, kind of like putting your name on your lunchbox. Either way, their presence always marks a threshold. You've entered a new layer of the temple's memory. As you pass between the lions, a breeze glides across your arms. It shouldn't. You're indoors. But it does. You glance up and spot a narrow slit in the wall. A vent maybe, or a flaw in the design. Or perhaps the temple itself needs to exhale once in a while. You nod, acknowledging the breath. You feel lighter for it.
The gallery opens before you like a quiet museum. Columns line either side, receding in the shadow. Their tops are intricately carved. Lotus blossoms, naga scales, some unidentifiable swirls that might have made sense 1,000 years ago. You walk slowly, deliberately, as if afraid to step on a story not meant for your feet. Every few steps, a new figure emerges from the walls. Some scenes are grand, celestial battles, divine processions, kings with 10 arms riding creatures that definitely wouldn't pass a safety inspection. Others are intimate, a woman weaving, a child playing with a monkey, a man offering a bowl to someone you can't quite see because erosion has smoothed the face into anonymity. You pause in front of one scene. It's a relief of two figures kneeling, hands pressed together in prayer. One wears a headdress shaped like a spire, the other has hair carved into tight coils. Between them is a flame. Not a dramatic fire, just a gentle little flicker etched into the stone, like the idea of fire rather than the real thing. You crouch slightly, looking closer. There's a faint groove near the flame, a small indentation worn smooth by fingers, generations of hands reaching out to touch this exact spot. Why here? Why this relief? No one knows. There's no inscription. Maybe it was believed to bring luck. Maybe it's just the right height. You reach out and touch it too. The stone is cool, but your fingertips tingle. Outside, you can hear the jungle humming again. Crickets, frogs, the rustle of palm leaves. It blends into a steady rhythm, a kind of ambient backdrop composed entirely by nature's night shift. Somewhere far off, a bird lets out a single squawk of protest, possibly at the moon. Then silence again. The corridor curves slightly, and you follow it. A row of columns cast rhythmic shadows across the floor. You step between them carefully, not wanting to break their pattern. And then, up ahead, another lion. This one is different. It's smaller, tucked into an alcove, almost like it's hiding. Its features are more eroded, softened by time, or perhaps by touch. Unlike the others, this lion is turned slightly sideways, almost as if it's watching the path behind you instead of guarding the one ahead. You crouch beside it. There's something oddly friendly about this one. Maybe it's the way its eyes are slightly uneven, or the way one paw seems to rest casually over a stone ledge. You imagine it being carved late at night by a weary artisan who'd had enough of making symmetrical things. One French story tells of a lion at Angkor Wat that came alive once every 100 years to walk the halls, not to attack intruders, but to simply stretch its legs and remember the feeling of movement. It never roared. It just wandered in silence, pausing here and there as if reminiscing. According to the story, if you see it and it sees you, you won't die, but you'll never leave. The temple will keep you, not as a prisoner, as part of the memory. You give the lion a respectful pat on the head. It doesn't move, which is just as well. You rise and continue down the gallery,
pausing here and there to inspect an odd marking, a patch of lichen, or a faded drawing that may or may not be graffiti. One figure seems to have a modern haircut. You blink and realize it's just erosion. Or is it? You pass beneath an archway that creaks slightly above your head. Not from movement, just from age. Everything here seems to carry a subtle murmur. You imagine the stones speaking to each other in low vibrations you can't quite hear. Maybe they gossip about tourists. Maybe they argue about the rain. Eventually, the corridor opens into a large chamber, a kind of crossroads where multiple paths converge. The floor dips slightly in the center, forming a shallow bowl. Rainwater collects here during monsoon season, and you can see faint watermarks on the stone. Right now, it's dry, but cool. The moonlight slants in from a high window, casting a spotlight on the center of the room. You hesitate, then step into the circle. Nothing happens. No booming voice, no ancient prophecy, just stillness. You close your eyes. The air here feels heavier, but not oppressive. More like you're standing in a memory that's trying not to fade. There's something comforting in knowing this space has been empty for centuries, and yet it's never been unused. People passed through, whispered here, rested, hid, prayed, laughed. You can almost hear them. Almost. You look down and notice faint markings on the floor. Not inscriptions, just small repeated patterns. Scuff marks? Ritual placements? Erosion? You kneel and trace them with a fingertip. They form a kind of loop, like dancers circling around the center. It's easy to imagine an old ritual taking place here, something lost to time but echoing in the pattern. You stay a moment longer, letting the silence wrap around your shoulders like a shawl. Then, without any reason, you decide to leave the chamber. Not out of fear or fatigue, just instinct. As if the temple whispered, "You've seen enough here." You return through the same archway, passing once again between the watchful lions. The original two still stand guard, silent and unmoving. You nod to them as you pass. You think you hear one of them sigh. But maybe that was just the wind.
The corridor narrows again, drawing you deeper into the heart of Angkor Wat like a soft breath inhaling. The moon outside grows higher, paler, casting less warmth and more mystery. You follow its light as it filters through carved windows, painting stripes on the floor like a tiger has just passed through without asking permission. As you walk, you become aware of something strange. It's not a sound or a sight. It's the way your footsteps echo, or rather, don't. You pause and step again. Nothing. The corridor seems to swallow sound, as if it's had enough noise for 1 millennium and decided to retire into silence. The only thing left is your breathing, and even that feels too loud, too present. Ahead, the passage opens into another long gallery, this one different from the others. It's lined with pillars on both sides, perfectly spaced, standing like ancient monks holding their breath. Each one casts a shadow across the stone floor, the moonlight slicing between them like a metronome. You take a slow step, and then another. The rhythm pulls you in. 1, 2, shadow, light, pillar, space. This is the Hall of Echoes, though no one calls it that officially. It's a name whispered by temple guides with a wink, passed between visitors with a smirk, because most who walk here say the same thing. It feels like you're being followed. Not by anything malicious, but by your own footsteps coming back to you, slightly late, slightly off, slightly not your own. You stop near one pillar and lean your shoulder against it. The stone is cool now, the heat of the day finally surrendered. You tilt your head and peer down the length of the gallery. At the far end, the path bends out of sight, But for now, you're in the middle of a hallway that seems like it could stretch forever. The air moves strangely here. It doesn't gust, doesn't breeze. It slides, as if pulled along invisible rails. You exhale and hear nothing. Then, a second later, you hear what might be your exhale again. Or someone else's. Or something mimicking you just well enough to be disconcerting. One mainstream historian once joked that this part of Angkor is acoustically cursed. The architecture, unintentionally or not, creates pockets of reverberation and dead zones. Some parts will throw your voice back at you 2 steps later. Others will eat it whole. During restoration work in the 1990s, several engineers reported hearing hammer strikes echo from places no one was working. They checked. Nothing. Some blamed the stone, some blamed the spirits. One just blamed dehydration and refused to talk about it again. You keep walking. The silence isn't oppressive, it's plush, thick. The kind of quiet you imagine in the back of a cathedral after midnight, or in the final seconds before a snowfall. You find it oddly comforting, like the temple has tucked you into a soft bed made of shadow and intention. And then you begin to notice something new. Carvings. Not just on the walls, on the pillars themselves. Each one is etched, some deeply, some faintly, with symbols, figures, and repeating motifs. You run your fingers over the patterns. They're not as refined as the grand bas-reliefs you passed earlier. These are simpler, cruder, almost like sketches. Some depict animals, snakes, birds, elephants. Others are more abstract, spirals, stars, flame-like shapes curling inward. One appears to be a human hand, fingers splayed, pressed directly into the stone like a fossil.
You pause at one particularly worn figure. It's a face. At least it used to be. 2 hollow eyes, a sharp nose, a crooked mouth. There's a faint suggestion of a crown or headdress. You tilt your head. It's smiling. Maybe. It's hard to tell. A French theory suggests these corridor carvings weren't part of the original design. They were added later, by pilgrims, monks, or even passing travelers who wanted to leave something behind. A symbol, a prayer, a signature. Think of it like a sacred guest book, but written in stone. Some scholars dismiss this entirely, calling the carvings graffiti. Others argue they're just as important as the official inscriptions, more human, more intimate, more real. You press your palm against the face carving, palm to face. It's rough and cold. And still, somehow, it feels like acknowledgement, like a nod from one traveler to another. You walk a bit more, and the gallery widens briefly, forming a kind of circular alcove. The columns here are thicker, more ornately carved. The space feels deliberate, like it was meant for gathering or waiting or watching. You stop in the center and turn slowly, taking it in. This is where the echoes begin. You hear it, a faint footstep, not yours, from behind. You spin. Nothing. You step forward. Silence. Then again. Another step. One beat behind yours. You try to match your pace with it. One step. Pause. Step again. Pause. You listen closely. Still nothing. You smile. Angkor is good at this, playing with sound, with time, with your sense of solitude. It's not scary. It's just strange. Familiar strange. Like a story your grandmother told you once that you swore was a dream. You keep moving and the echo fades, or adjusts, or follows. You're not sure anymore. As you approach the far end of the gallery, the moonlight begins to weaken. The pillars become silhouettes, the shadows more complete. But one last carving catches your eye. Etched low, near the base of the final column. You kneel. It's a set of footprints. Not actual prints, but carved ones. 2 feet, side by side, with simple toes and a shallow heel. No labels, no inscriptions. Just the impression of someone once standing here, or wishing they had. You place your own feet beside them. The fit is close, though not exact. You're reminded that someone stood here long before you, and someone else likely will again. A soft breeze brushes through the corridor. You turn your face into it. For a moment you imagine it's the breath of the temple itself, sighing out the weight of centuries. Then, from around the corner, soft, gentle, distant, you hear laughter. Not loud, not echoing, just a small chuckle, like someone told a very old joke and only one person found it funny. You peer down the corridor. Nothing moves. Of course not. But you smile anyway, because you get the joke now. The joke is time. The joke is footsteps and echoes and ancient graffiti that looks like your own handwriting. The joke is that you came looking for a ruined temple and found a structure more alive than your neighbor's houseplants. And as you step around the bend, the laughter fades. The corridor ends. A new space opens before you. But the echoes, they stay. The gallery gives way to a slightly wider hall, where the ceiling rises again in slow stone arches that feel like they're stretching after a nap. Moonlight spills in through side windows, narrow slits carved with lazy elegance, casting the walls in alternating patches of shadow and glow. And there, right above you, begin the apsaras. They're everywhere. Dozens, maybe hundreds, dancing along the upper reaches of the walls like celestial wallpaper. Their stone bodies sway in poses that defy logic and gravity. Their delicate hands forming intricate mudras, their heads adorned with towering headdresses that surely weren't practical even by divine standards. You stop walking for a moment, head tilted all the way back, your neck aching, but your eyes transfixed. They look down at you, not in judgment, not even in amusement, but in a sort of dreamy detachment, like you're just another evening breeze passing through their never-ending performance. One apsara near the center is particularly striking. Her face is more intact than most, her eyes still sharp despite the centuries. She's caught in mid-twirl, her left foot slightly raised, her robe swirling like a river caught in pause. There's a smudge of lichen on her cheek that looks suspiciously like a blush. You raise a hand as if to wave, then drop it, feeling faintly embarrassed, waving at a wall. Well done. There's something about the apsaras that makes the whole place feel less like a ruin and more like a party that never quite ended. Not the loud kind with drums and spilled drinks, but a quieter, more sacred celebration, like a birthday for the universe that happens every night. These are not passive decorations. They are participants, witnesses, maybe even custodians. Mainstream historians agree the apsaras were modeled after real court dancers. The Khmer Empire was famous for its elaborate royal ballet, performances that combine myth, movement, and costume into something between theater and prayer. These dancers were trained from childhood, mastering thousands of gestures, each with a specific meaning. Their role was not just entertainment, but intercession, a physical language offered to the gods. One fringe theory even suggests that certain dances performed by royal apsaras were designed to alter weather patterns, encourage harvests, or influence political outcomes. Dance as diplomacy. Or maybe dance as divine persuasion. Imagine swirling your fingers just right and convincing the monsoon to wait another week. That's power. You keep walking,
the Apsaras guiding you silently from above. The hall seems to pulse with their rhythm, each step aligning with an invisible drumbeat you can almost hear. Your feet move slower now, as if you're not just passing through, but being choreographed. The carvings on the lower walls begin to shift in theme, less divine, more domestic. Scenes of daily life appear: a woman grinding grain, a man fishing in a canoe, children splashing in a pond. The kind of quiet vignettes that never made it into royal records, but lived on in stone nonetheless. You pause beside a panel where two women sit under a tree. One is combing the other's hair. There's no text, no explanation, just a moment of intimacy immortalized in sandstone. It feels deeply familiar, like something you've seen or lived in a different time. You wonder who decided this was worth carving. Someone with a sense of tenderness, clearly.
You smile. Of course. The gods have their dancers, and the people have their quiet rituals too. The hall narrows again, the ceiling dipping low. You duck instinctively, even though there's still space. Something about the change makes the air feel denser, more secretive. You're in the whispering corridor now, or so one monk once called it. He claimed this was where stories were traded at night, not out loud, but in murmurs, gestures, symbols traced in dust. Temple guardians would gather here, those assigned to keep watch during the hours when the moon ruled the sky, and swap tales. Not just about gods and kings, but about things they'd seen, felt, or imagined. Animals with human voices, monks who vanished into walls, statues that cried. You press your hand lightly against the wall. The stone is smoother here, less adorned. It feels worn, used, not from erosion, but from presence. The kind of wear that comes from leaning, listening, sharing. You imagine sitting here beside a fellow guardian, eyes drooping, sharing the kind of story that makes sense only at midnight. Perhaps they talked about the Black Panther, a legend whispered through generations. A creature said to roam the temple grounds silently, invisible to most, but visible to those who walked without fear. Some say it was a spirit guide. Others believed it was a former priest, cursed for pride, doomed to prowl until forgiven by the moon. Historians, of course, dismiss the panther stories entirely. No physical evidence, they say. No bones, no claws. But those who stayed overnight here tend to avoid walking alone, just in case. You crouch down at a small recess in the wall, just a dip in the stone, but smooth and bowl-shaped, an offering niche, perhaps. You see remnants of wax, a few burnt stems of incense, and, somehow still intact, a small dried flower. It crumbles to dust when you exhale. There's a sudden breeze, strange because this corridor is enclosed. It carries the faintest scent of cinnamon or clove, a cooking fire maybe from the outer village, or a memory. The corridor opens again into a small courtyard, square, bare, surrounded by low walls. The moon shines directly overhead, spotlighting the center in soft silver. It feels like a forgotten room in an old house, the place where someone once kept secrets, or tools, or silence. You step into the center and lie down on the cool stone. For a moment, everything stills. The moonlight passes gently on your eyelids. The Apsaras are gone from sight now, but you can still feel their presence above, like a ceiling of dancers twirling in slow motion. The air is thick with story. Your ears hum with the soft rustle of time. One star appears beside the moon. You breathe in. You breathe out. Somewhere nearby, a bird chirps once, then sleeps again. You hear a faint laugh, not mocking, not loud, just amused. Maybe the Apsaras are still watching.
You sit up slowly, the stone still cool against your palms. The moon has moved just a little, sliding its light from the center of the courtyard to one corner, as if pointing the way. You take the hint. The temple, it seems, is in a cooperative mood tonight. You rise and head toward the eastern edge, where a narrow corridor opens beneath a crumbling arch. This passage is older than most. The stone is darker, almost bruised with age, and covered in what looks like soot or residue from centuries of smoke. You run your fingers along it, expecting grit, but it's smooth, glossy even, as if polished by countless passing hands, or maybe by the long, slow rubbing of memory itself. You duck slightly and step inside. The air changes immediately. Not colder exactly, but thicker, heavier. The kind of air that has a texture like velvet dipped in ash. And there, lining the walls on either side, is the serpent. No, not a live one. Don't worry. A naga, carved in undulating repetition, stretches the full length of the corridor, its 7 heads flaring at regular intervals, fangs bared, eyes wide with eternal alertness. The body coils back and forth in a serpentine wave, forming the balustrade of the walkway. If the apsaras danced with the heavens, the naga danced with the earth, and possibly with your nerves. In Khmer mythology, the naga is more than just a snake. It's a creature of immense power and cosmic importance. It links worlds, guards sacred thresholds, and sometimes marries lonely princes. One origin myth tells of a human who fell in love with a naga princess. When they wed, the nagas emerged from their underwater kingdom to create the Khmer people. Which means, if the story holds any weight, you're walking beside your very, very distant in-laws. You pause beside one of the 7-headed figures and study its expression. It doesn't seem hostile, more like mildly inconvenienced. You can relate. Each head is carved with subtle differences, one snarling, one sneering, one looking bored. The others are harder to read. You wonder if this was intentional, or just the sculptor's way of keeping things interesting. Maybe, like modern artists, he got bored halfway through and thought, what if I gave this one resting disapproval face? One fringe theory, unsupported but oddly persistent, suggests that the naga corridors were designed to be walked in silence, not out of reverence, but because the curves and coils of the carving create an acoustic pattern. If you speak, your voice gets swallowed. If you sing, the stone vibrates. If you whisper a truth, the temple remembers.
You don't test the theory, not yet. You continue down the corridor. The naga coils snake alongside you, now dipping lower, now rising again to eye level. In the flickering moonlight, they almost appear to move, like the stone itself is stretching. You blink slowly, letting the illusion settle. It's like walking beside an ancient thought that never quite finished forming. At the midpoint of the corridor, you stop. There's a small doorway to your right, almost hidden behind the curve of the naga's body. It's not a grand portal, just a square cut into the wall with a lintel that barely clears your head. You duck inside. The space is small, round, domed with stone that sweats a little from condensation. And on the floor, arranged in a circle, are small clay dishes. Most are broken now, but a few remain intact. Inside them, old ash, dried petals, bits of bone. This was a prayer room, or an offering chamber, or a meditation cell, or maybe all three. The temple doesn't always separate functions neatly. It was built to blur boundaries between gods and humans, between rest and ritual, between now and then. You kneel and place your hand over one of the intact dishes. The ash inside is faintly warm, though there's no sign of fire. You leave it undisturbed and back away slowly, feeling as though you've interrupted something sacred, or something sleepy. Returning to the naga corridor, you walk the rest of its length. The serpent ends just as abruptly as it began, its final tail curling into a spiral at the edge of a worn threshold. Beyond this point, the floor drops slightly, as if you're descending into a belly, or a memory. And that's when you feel it. A soft shift in air pressure, a sound just behind your shoulder. Not quite a footstep, more like the swish of fabric on stone. You turn. Nothing. Just the seven-headed Naga, still watching, still unimpressed. You smile, a little embarrassed, and turn forward again. There's a change in the carvings here. They become more abstract, less narrative, more symbolic. Instead of figures, you see wheels, lotuses, flame motifs, and repeating knotwork patterns that seem to loop into themselves like riddles. These were probably yantras, sacred diagrams meant for meditation or protection. Some scholars believe these diagrams were more than decoration. They were spiritual tools, portals for the mind. Not literal portals, of course, though one French explorer in the 1890s did claim to have touched a yantra, blacked out, and awoken 3 hours later with wet feet and a nosebleed. He was promptly dismissed from the expedition and told never to speak of it again. He wrote about it anyway, in poetry.
You blink the flower away and continue. The floor here is damp. Small puddles reflect the moonlight like misplaced stars. You step carefully to avoid slipping, though even the puddles seem strangely deliberate. This is Angkor, after all. Even the accidents feel choreographed. Ahead, the corridor widens into a covered balcony. You step out, and there it is. The temple's great causeway, the central walkway you crossed hours ago, maybe days ago. Time is funny now, stretching out beneath you like the spine of a sleeping beast. On either side, the dark water of the moat glistens faintly, still and silent. Beyond, the jungle presses close, a velvet wall dotted with occasional starlight. But it's not the view that holds you, it's the sound. Faint, rhythmic, musical. Someone is humming. Not a tune you recognize, not even something you'd call a melody. Just a string of notes, hummed softly, repeatedly, like a lullaby sung by someone who hasn't quite learned the words. You lean against the railing, listening. The sound doesn't grow louder. It doesn't change. It simply exists, threading itself through the stone, the water, the night. And then, just as gently, it stops. You wait. Silence. You wait longer. Still silence. And then, from somewhere deep within the temple, the frogs begin again. Back to work, you think. Night is still young. You turn from the balcony, nod once at the Naga carving behind you, its heads now bathed in shadow, and slip back into the corridor. You've only begun to uncover the stories here, and some of them are just now waking up. You follow the curve of the temple's inner wall, your feet gliding now more than walking, like the stone itself is gently pulling you along. The moon, nearly at its peak, spills over the high parapets and lights your path like a divine spotlight. Never too bright, never too dim, just enough to suggest that someone, somewhere, still cares about ambience. You pass beneath another arched corridor, one you don't remember from earlier, but it feels familiar all the same. Maybe it's because the corners of Angkor repeat themselves, the same lotus-shaped columns, the same soft hush of still air, the same faint smell of earth, lichen, and regret. You're not lost. You're temporarily displaced. It's different. The corridor opens onto a long chamber with wide steps leading upward, flanked by 2 stone platforms. One of them has what appears to be a large, overturned pot. Except it's not a pot. It's a helmet, carved of stone, enormous. You peer at it, eyes adjusting.
It's part of a scene you didn't notice until now. A changing of the guard. You step closer. The entire wall, floor to ceiling, is carved with figures in profile. Warriors, temple guards, bearing swords and spears, their faces strangely serene. Some are mid-step, others at attention. You can practically hear the clang of bronze armor and the shuffle of sandals, though no real metal was ever used here. The Khmer military used leather and cloth and the occasional reinforced rattan. Bronze was reserved for statues and divine toes. You trace your fingers across one of the figures, his eyes almond-shaped, his jaw square, and his hand resting on the hilt of a blade you suspect was mostly used for a ceremonial intimidation. His expression is unreadable, calm, resigned, maybe tired of the night shift. You understand that. Guarding the same walls for centuries must be exhausting, even for those carved in stone. You ascend the wide steps slowly, your shadow stretching long behind you, overlapping with the guards on the wall. Just for a moment, you're one of them, a stand-in, a silent sentry. You pause at the top, hands folded behind your back. It's nice, pretending, being part of the background, being stone. You exhale, and in that moment, you swear the statue nearest you exhales too. You turn your head. Still stone. Still. There's a story, one of the quieter ones, rarely told by guides or books, passed only in passing whispers, that the night shift never really ended at Angkor. The guards, chosen not just for their strength, but for their silence, were assigned lifelong service to the temple. Lifelong. And sometimes, when their lives ended, the temple didn't let them go. Not in a spooky way. Nothing jumped out, no skeletons in armor, no cursed echoes, just a lingering, a presence, a memory too solid to fade. Some believe the carved guards aren't depictions, they're transformations. Stone not carved, but absorbed. People who stood still for long enough until the stones simply kept them. You smile. Surely. Just a story. You continue walking. The room narrows again, turning into another corridor, and suddenly you're aware of temperature. It's warmer here. Not hot, but undeniably warmer, like stepping from a stone cellar into a sunlit kitchen. Except it's the middle of the night, and you're surrounded by sandstone, and no one's making tea. You press your palm to the wall. Warm. Not uniformly, just in spots, like pockets, like residual heat, or body heat. You tilt your head. No, don't be dramatic.
It's just the stone, holding the day's warmth. The laws of thermodynamics still apply, even in magical temples. Probably. You walk on. Here, the carvings shift tone again. These aren't apsaras, or deities, or celestial battles. These are scenes of rituals. You see figures bowing before altars, monks walking in procession, hands folded, heads bowed. One holds a lotus. Another holds what appears to be a small bowl, maybe filled with water or oil or something more symbolic. But one figure catches your eye. He's kneeling, no headdress, no adornments, just a simple robe, a shaved head, and in front of him, a crocodile. Not carved in a menacing pose, not open-mouthed or dramatic, just resting, reclining, almost lounging. The monk is reaching out. The crocodile is watching him. You squint. This is not your standard religious imagery. There's a faint inscription below, half worn and half covered by a crack.
You can't read ancient Khmer, but it feels important. You lean closer, and suddenly, you remember the story. The priest and the crocodile. It goes like this. A temple monk, known for his piety, but also his arrogance, declared one evening that he feared nothing, not death, not darkness, not even the river beasts that took so many villagers each year. He claimed that his purity would protect him, that no creature, divine or otherwise, would dare touch a man so close to the gods. So the other monks, tired of his sermons, challenged him. Walk to the river tonight and offer a prayer at the altar stone, alone, without fire, without chanting. If your heart is pure, you will return. He went and never came back. But the next morning, a crocodile was found resting on the altar stone, facing the temple, not attacking, not even moving, just watching. Some say it was the monk, transformed. Others say it was the monk's spirit, bound into the beast. A few claim the crocodile whispered in Sanskrit. None agree on what it said. This carving, it seems, is the only physical record of the tale. A quiet corner of the temple, where myth and memory converge. You look at the crocodile's eyes. You could swear they glint. But no, just the moon. You step back from the wall. The warmth is stronger now, more encompassing. You realize this corridor curves gently inward, spiraling towards something central. You're being guided, not just by architecture, but by narrative. The temple is telling you a story, slowly, sleepily, like a grandparent who knows you'll doze off halfway through, but tells it anyway. You round one last bend. A small room opens before you, octagonal, vaulted ceiling, open at the top, where the moonlight falls like a white pillar through the center. In the middle of the room stands a basin, carved from a single block of stone, about waist high. It's filled with water. Still, perfectly still. You step toward it, and for a moment, the surface reflects only the moon. Then, your face. Then as you lean a bit closer, someone else's. You freeze. Blink. Gone. You inhale, sharp and sudden. Then laugh. Just a trick of the light, a composite reflection, the brain looking for patterns, moonlight and carvings and too much storytelling. But you still back away slowly. And the basin? The basin remains still, patient. You turn toward the doorway. Somewhere outside, the frogs start up again, a fresh chorus. The rhythm slightly different, like a new shift has begun. You smile. The guardians may have changed, but the stories never stop. The night deepens. The moon now leans slightly westward, drawing soft blue shadows across the temple walls like the smudged brushstrokes of a tired painter. You leave the basin room behind, its water still mirroring some forgotten truth, and follow a gently descending path. The air shifts again, cooler this time, tinged with the scent of wet stone and a whisper of something woody, like sandalwood or burnt rice. The corridor opens slowly, the walls pulling back to reveal a small courtyard partially open to the sky. At the far end, crumbling stairs lead downward into what appears to be a sunken terrace. You pause at the top of the steps, hesitant. The terrace is half in shadow, half bathed in soft moonlight, and for a moment you can't tell if it's meant to welcome or warn. Still, curiosity wins, as it usually does in places like this, and you begin to descend. Each step echoes softly, not sharply, but like a sigh in reverse. At the bottom, the stone floor is uneven, worn by centuries of rain and barefoot procession. In the middle of the terrace,
partly shrouded by moss and curled vines, stands a shrine. It's modest, just a single stone platform raised slightly above the ground with a carved niche where a statue clearly once stood. But it's gone now. Only the space remains. An absence so precisely shaped, so clearly intentional, it's almost louder than the presence ever was. A base for a deity minus the deity. A stage awaiting an actor who forgot their lines and never came back. You approach the empty niche. There are faint marks in the stone where feet once stood, two small indentations worn smooth. You crouch and place your fingers on them. They're colder than the rest of the stone, as if they missed their occupant. Or maybe they're just tired of being touched. There's a faint inscription on the back wall, partially eroded, half hidden by ivy. You try to trace the letters. Sanskrit, perhaps, or Khmer, or a blend of both. The Khmer Empire was multilingual after all, and priests were polyglots out of necessity. The script curves and loops, but large portions are missing. Still, one symbol remains clear. A grin. Not a word, an actual carving. A mouth, stylized, curved up slightly at both ends. It's not joyful, it's not menacing, just knowing. A quiet smile carved into the back wall of a shrine that no longer contains its god. And suddenly, the story comes back to you. The tale of the smiling statue. They say there once stood here a small image of a seated Buddha, or maybe a bodhisattva, whose face bore an enigmatic grin. Not wide, not gleeful, but unmistakably serene. And over the years, as the empire rose and fell, as monks came and went, as storms flooded the courtyards and fires licked at the lintels, the statue remained. Until one day, it didn't. It disappeared. Not stolen, not broken, just gone. No traces, no tools left behind, no drag marks in the dust. The pedestal remained, unchipped. The offerings remained, untouched. The grin, however, was carved into the back wall exactly where the statue's head would have shadowed it. A message? A farewell? A prank? Historians argue, of course. Some say it was looted and replaced with a symbol of satire. Others believe it was a signal. Perhaps the statue was hidden for safekeeping, and this was a clue for future monks. One particularly imaginative scholar theorized that the statue simply stood up and left, its spirit returning to wherever statues go when they've smiled long enough.
You lean back on your heels, still staring at the grin. It really is unsettling, not because it's scary, but because it feels alive. Not carved, not chiseled, drawn, scribbled by a finger dipped in time itself. You rise and scan the area around the shrine. The terrace floor is uneven, but one section looks freshly disturbed. Not new exactly, but different. Less mossy, less worn. You walk over and crouch. There's a faint depression in the stone, almost like a footprint. Not deep, not sharp, but definite. Just one, facing the direction of the shrine. You stand up again, slowly. Your shadow merges with the shrines as you move. For a moment, you imagine you're standing in for the statue, continuing the vigil, keeping the smile alive. Then the wind shifts. It comes from the east, low and steady, threading through the temple corridors like a traveler who knows the way home. With it comes a soft sound. Not music, not chanting, more like a shuffle. Bare feet on stone. Slow, steady, purposeful. You don't move. It continues for several heartbeats, then stops. You look behind you. Empty. The terrace is silent again. The grin remains. You exhale. A fringe tradition among former temple guardians claims that the Nightwalker, an unnamed monk or spirit or memory, patrols Angkor Wat every full moon. They carry no weapon, wear no robe, and speak no words. But they leave small signs in their wake. A footprint where no one stepped, a scent of jasmine in a windless room, a smile etched where stone had only been blank before. Some say
The Nightwalker is a fragment of the temple itself. Others say it's the embodiment of a story never told aloud, a story too soft, too kind, too complicated for language, a story that can only be walked. You leave the terrace quietly. The stairs seem less steep on the way back up, or maybe the stone is being polite. Either way, you reach the top and pause, glancing back once more at the empty shrine and its ever-present smile. You nod. It feels like the right thing to do. You follow the eastern wall now, walking parallel to the moat, though it's out of sight. The path is narrow but deliberate. You pass through shadow after shadow, each one holding the echo of a guard's post, a folded robe, a sleeping prayer. Eventually, the corridor opens into a small portico, and there, waiting for you, is another lion. But this one is different, smaller, lower, almost bashful. Its mouth is closed, its head tilted slightly. One paw is lifted mid-step, as though it was about to walk off, but changed its mind at the last second. You crouch to inspect it. The carving is older, weathered not by time, but by touch. Hundreds, maybe thousands of hands must have grazed its surface, smoothing its mane, dulling the edges of its paws. Someone left a small offering tucked beneath its chin, a frayed red thread tied into a loop. You don't touch it. Some threads aren't meant to be pulled. Instead, you sit beside the lion, back against the cool wall, knees drawn up, breath steady. The stone is comfortable, the air still. Somewhere deep inside the temple, a soft bell rings. Not loud, not sharp, just one note. Then silence. And then, faintly, as if from another courtyard entirely, the frogs begin again. You close your eyes, and the smile follows you.
The lion watches you for a while longer, or perhaps it never stops. But eventually, you rise, legs a bit stiff from the stone, and begin walking again. The corridor curves eastward now, away from the terrace of the vanished statue and its grin, deeper into the temple's inner layers. The stone grows smoother here, more polished, like the inner walls of a well-worn shell. Each surface has been touched, leaned against, prayed before. Your footsteps grow quieter, not muffled, absorbed, like the temple has decided it likes you and will now start storing bits of your presence for later use. You don't mind. It's flattering, in a strange sandstone way. You round a corner and find yourself in a narrow passage that slopes gently downward. Moisture gathers at the edges of the stones here, thin streams trickling into grooves carved so long ago they've forgotten whether they were meant for water or something more symbolic. You follow the descent. And then, without warning, you notice something peculiar. Your footsteps sound different. You stop. Step again. Yes, there it is. Not stone beneath your sandals now, but something else. You crouch and touch the ground. The texture has changed. Smooth, hard, slightly metallic. You wipe away a film of dust and reveal a polished surface beneath, a slab of black stone, inlaid with a grid of tiny, perfectly etched squares, each just a bit smaller than your palm. This is the star map room, though most don't call it that, because most don't know it exists. You step fully onto the slab, and the faint sheen of moonlight from a high slit in the ceiling reveals more of the design. Constellations, or what you think are constellations. Symbols shaped like animals, rivers, flames, and wheels. Dots and lines connect them in a pattern so intricate it feels more like music than astronomy. Some of the shapes resemble known formations, Orion's belt, perhaps, or the Pleiades, but others are unfamiliar, arrangements of stars from southern skies long forgotten. The Khmer Empire was vast, and their celestial knowledge broad. Some believe this floor represents not just stars, but time itself, a cosmic calendar that tracked festivals,
eclipses, and coronations. A map not of where you are, but when. You step carefully between the stars, half expecting something to shift beneath your feet. Nothing does, but the room feels attuned, like it's paying attention.
A fringe scholar once proposed that this map wasn't designed to be looked at from above, but from below. That is, it was a reverse of the heavens, etched for the gods looking up at the human world. He suggested that if you stood in the exact center on the right night, you could offer a prayer that would echo straight into the heavens without distortion. Of course, he was laughed out of the Royal Academy and went on to become a potter. His bowls all have tiny stars carved into their bases. You stop in what feels like the middle of the map. There's a small depression here, no deeper than the others, but ringed with a faint inscription. You crouch and read what you can. The letters are curling, floral, and delicate. Not Khmer script, Sanskrit maybe, or a hybrid. It seems to say, "To know the stars is not to see them." You sit cross-legged in the center. The air is colder here. The black stone draws heat from your hands, but you don't move. You close your eyes, and in the dark, the temple begins to whisper. Not with voices, not even with words, but with memory. You see flashes, not of your life, but of others. Someone sharpening a blade before dawn. Someone braiding their hair beside a pool. Someone placing a lotus on this very floor, whispering a name you almost remember. Your breath deepens. Your shoulders drop. The stars press against the back of your mind, not as pinpoints of light, but as weights, as markers, as anchors, each one pulling slightly, a gravitational lullaby. Then, a breeze, from nowhere. It swirls through the chamber like a question, rustling the air just enough to shift a few leaves on the floor. Leaves? You didn't notice any before. You open your eyes. There on the black stone, 3 frangipani petals have fallen, pale white, perfect. No tree nearby, no wind shaft above. You pick one up. It's fresh, damp, alive. Someone, or something, left them for you. You stand again, strangely comforted. The petals remain where they fall, like little blessings or bookmarks. As you move toward the edge of the chamber, you glance back once. The stars underfoot remain still, but somehow you feel they've shifted, just slightly, as if aligning for the next visitor, or for whatever moment is coming next. You exit through a narrow arch and into another corridor. This one feels older, less symmetrical. The stones here have buckled and bowed, giving the hallway an uneven, organic feel. The moonlight doesn't reach this far. You rely on memory, touch, and instinct. Eventually, the path ends at a short staircase, leading up into a chamber, so dim you almost miss the doorway. You step inside. It's small, circular, walls etched with script so faded it looks like lichen. In the center, resting on a squat pedestal, is a box. Stone, carved, closed. You approach slowly. The box is plain, no lid, no handle. Just a cube, worn smooth on every side. But carved into the top is a shape you recognize. A lotus. 5 petals, flared wide. You run your fingers along the petals. Cold, deeply carved. And at the center, a tiny hole, barely the size of a fingertip. You hesitate, then press your index finger in. A soft click. Then nothing. You blink, then realize The air has changed. It's warmer, heavier. And there's a sound now, a soft hum, faint, like a single long note held forever. The hum seems to come from the walls. You step back. The lotus glows faintly. Not a light exactly, more like an awareness. You feel it more than see it. You don't panic. After all, panic is impossible here. The temple doesn't allow it. You kneel in front of the box and lower your head. Not in worship, in curiosity. And there, with your ear close to the lotus, you hear a voice, a whisper. Look up. You do. And the ceiling of the chamber, once dark and blank, is now glowing softly with shapes. Stars, but unlike any chart you've seen before. These aren't constellations, they're stories. A monk walking into a river, a woman turning into a bird, a lion watching a child sleep, a basin that reflects not your face but your future, all traced in faint lines of moonlight. Then the glow fades. The lotus goes dark. The room stills. You rise slowly, heart quiet, hands steady. The box is just a box again. The room is just a room again. But you are not just a traveler anymore. The stars have seen you and remembered. You step out of the chamber, barefoot now, the stone cooler, the temple quieter. Somewhere in the distance, a frog sings off-key. And somewhere closer, the wind whispers a single syllable. Not your name, but close.
You step back into the open air with a softness you hadn't noticed in yourself before, as though the very act of walking now requires less effort. Something inside you has settled, like a coin at the bottom of a wishing well, finally reaching stillness. Above, the moon has begun its descent, drifting westward in slow, stately arcs. Its light is more blue now, less silver, as if even it is growing tired. The corridor leads you toward the central tower, the great lotus that crowns Angkor Wat's silhouette. From the outside, it's iconic. From the inside, it's disorienting. Not just grand, but oddly alive. The inner sanctum of the temple once held its most sacred image. For centuries, it was thought to be a statue of Vishnu, then later, Buddha. Now, it holds only shadows and a few scattered offerings, wilted petals, folded cloth, a single incense stick that never burned. The sanctum isn't empty, it's expectant, like it's waiting for someone. Or something. You approach the wide stone staircase that leads upward. The steps are steep, narrow, and uneven, designed that way intentionally. Worshippers were meant to climb slowly, carefully, with respect. You do. Each step feels like a question, each exhale an answer you're not quite sure of. Halfway up, you pause and turn. Below you, the temple sprawls in layers of darkened roofs, curling galleries, and shadow-drenched courtyards. The jungle surrounds it all like a coiled dragon, sleeping but ever watchful. You imagine being a guardian standing on this spot 1,000 years ago, scanning for torches in the tree line. Or worse, no torches at all. You reach the summit and find yourself in the heart of the central tower. It's quieter here than anywhere else in the temple. Not silent, just deeper. The kind of quiet that wraps around your ears like velvet, silencing the outside world and letting only the softest things in. The chamber is round, enclosed, and tall. The ceiling above tapers like a spiral, ending in a narrow shaft that opens to the sky. A perfect circle of moonlight lands on the stone floor in the exact center. Not off to the side, not askew, exactly center. You step toward it. The light pools like milk, soft and glowing, and as you stand inside it, your shadow disappears completely. It's disorienting, like stepping out of existence. For a moment, you feel weightless, not in body, but in being. Like all the stories clinging to you, the fears, the names, the goals, have gone quiet. You close your eyes, and then you feel it. A draft. Not a breeze,
not the casual puff of night air. This is a current, subtle, upward, as though the temple itself is exhaling through the narrow shaft above. You lift your chin, eyes still closed, and feel it move across your face like a hand you can't see. And somewhere above you, a sound, a low fluttering, a rustle, then silence. Then, unmistakably, wings. You open your eyes, just in time to see a bat, or maybe something shaped like a bat, spiral down through the shaft, glide once around the chamber, and vanish into an upper crevice. It didn't screech, didn't startle, just pass through, on schedule, as if it had somewhere to be. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. And that's when you notice them. Carvings, faint, almost ghostly, lining the base of the chamber walls.
They're not like the grand bas-reliefs outside. These are finer, shallower, etched in narrow bands no more than a few inches tall. You walk the circumference slowly, tracing the ring with your fingertips. Figures, symbols, scripts, but one section stops you cold. It depicts a ceremony, not a royal one, no thrones or parasols or elephants. This is smaller, more intimate. 4 figures kneeling in a circle, one pouring something from a bowl into a shallow dish at the center, another holding what appears to be a mirror. And then there's a 5th figure, standing apart, watching, faceless. Not in an eerie way, the face simply isn't carved, as though whoever made the relief left it blank intentionally, or couldn't decide what it should look like, or didn't dare. Above this scene, a single word is carved in larger script. You don't recognize it. Not Sanskrit, not Khmer, just a word. But it resonates somewhere deep in your memory, like a bell struck far away. You whisper it aloud, softly, experimentally. The air does not react, but your spine does. A subtle shiver, like someone just walked over your future. You step back, and then a light flickers behind you. You turn. A torch, lit. In the far corner, standing upright in a bronze holder you hadn't noticed before. Its flame is small, steady, casting a gentle amber glow across the chamber. You blink once, and the torch is out. You are alone again. The moonlight still rests at your feet, but that small patch of wall, it's warmer now. You touch it, and behind it, just barely, a hollow sound. You press your ear to the stone. Nothing. Then, a knock. Soft, measured, just once. Then silence. You step back slowly, not afraid, just aware. The central tower isn't just sacred, it's awake. This was the holiest point in the temple, not just physically highest, but cosmically central. Many believe the tower was meant to represent Mount Meru, the mythical axis of the universe, a place where gods gathered, where time thinned, where stories lingered long after being forgotten. Mainstream scholars claim the tower was once lined with gold, that it shimmered in the sun like a beacon. Some even argue that it was visible for miles, guiding travelers, pilgrims, and kings alike. Now it's mostly shadow and wind and memory, but you'd be foolish to think it holds less power now. One fringe belief held by certain reclusive monks is that the central tower was not built to worship in, but to worship through. That the shaft above you was a channel, not just to the sky, but to the unseen. Some said prayers offered here rose faster, more directly. Others believed that on certain nights, if you stood in the moonlight and asked the right question, the temple would answer. You stand in the light again. You ask nothing, but you listen. You listen for a long, long time, and eventually, just as you were about to step away, The moon shifts, just slightly. The circle of light moves from your feet to the base of the far wall, illuminating one last carving. You step closer. It's a bird. Simple, elegant, wings outstretched. Its eyes are open. Its beak is shut, and below it, 3 dots arranged in a line. No one knows what they mean, but they're everywhere in Angkor, if you look long enough. At baseboards, corners, lintels, behind statues, on Apsara's feet. 3 dots. A code, a signature, a reminder. You step away slowly, and the light follows you.
You descend from the central tower slowly, one careful step at a time, as though coming down from a place that wasn't entirely of this world. The moon has shifted again, casting longer shadows across the stairs, stretching them like threads unraveling from the hem of the night. Each step feels more grounded than the last, less like floating, more like remembering how to walk. As you reach the base of the tower, the air feels thicker again, denser with scent and age. The stone here has a darker hue, as if it's been absorbing not only centuries of footsteps, but also the weight of stories no one quite dared to say out loud. You run your fingers along the wall and notice the carvings return, not grand battle scenes or heavenly dances this time, but symbols, symbols everywhere. Tiny ones, etched close to the floor, some only the size of a coin. Spirals, lines, flowers, birds, that 3-dot triangle again. It's carved again and again, sometimes in perfect symmetry, sometimes hurried and crooked. Someone was obsessed, or several someones, over centuries. You crouch beside one and trace the dots with your fingertip. They're shallow, but firm, intentional. You remember the bird under the central tower, the one with its wings open and 3 dots below. You look again at the wall beside you. There's a bird here too, cruder, less majestic, but its beak also points upward. You follow its gaze. It leads you to a corner of the hallway, an innocuous place, shadowed and cracked, where the floor dips slightly and the air smells faintly of dust and pepper leaves. A stone panel stands against the wall, slightly ajar, not broken, moved, as though someone had opened it and forgotten to close it all the way. You pause, and then, very gently, you push. The panel shifts without protest. Behind it, a passageway, narrow, low-ceilinged, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it, or unless something was leading you there. You duck your head and step inside. The air changes immediately. It smells untouched, less like old stone, more like sealed time. No wind here, no jungle scent, just the quiet breath of a place that hasn't been disturbed in a very long while. The corridor turns left, then right, then narrows even more, as though the very path is unsure of whether you should be here. You press on. Finally, the space opens, just a little, into a chamber barely big enough to stand fully upright. The walls here are smooth. No carvings, no statues, just a single block of stone, about the size of a chair, resting in the center. You circle it. There's no decoration, no ornament, just one thing. A handprint, pressed deep into the top of the stone, fingers slightly spread, life-sized, human. You reach out and hover your hand above it. The alignment is close, closer than you expected. You lower your palm slowly until your skin meets the cold, carved surface. A breeze from nowhere. You don't pull away. The chamber seems to exhale, and then, very faintly, you hear something. A whisper.
Not words, not language, just the sensation of something old and soft curling into your ear like a memory. You blink. A flicker of warmth passes from the stone to your fingers. Then it stops. You remove your hand and notice the inscription now glowing faintly on the chamber wall. It wasn't there before, or maybe it was, waiting for the right moment. It reads, "Where memory is forgotten, the stone remembers." You read it again, and again. The glow fades. The wall returns to silence. You exit the chamber slowly, carefully retracing your steps, hand trailing along the smooth wall as if to say thank you. The passage feels a little shorter now, a little wider, or maybe you've grown lighter. When you re-emerge into the main corridor, the panel closes gently behind you, as if the temple is tucking its secrets back into bed. You return to the gallery and follow the hall eastward. The stone under your feet hums faintly with night heat, and the carvings become more ornate again. Celestial dancers return, this time joined by musicians, drummers, and flute players carved mid-song. You pause beside one, a young man holding a drum, his fingers raised, caught in a beat that never ends. His smile is subtle, content, focused. His eyes look past you, or through you. A soft breeze carries the scent of lemongrass, fresh, bright, and totally out of place. And then you see the next door, smaller than the others, wooden, strangely. Not solid, just the remnants of one. The hinges still attached to the stone frame, the wood long rotted away. Through it, a new gallery opens, one with tall shelves and open alcoves. You found the Southern Library, or what remains of it. The room is rectangular, roof partially collapsed, moonlight flooding in through broken tiles. Vines curl through the walls like scribbles in the margins of a forgotten manuscript. Shelves line the walls, some still standing, others slumped sideways like tired scribes. The floor is littered with fragments, bits of wood, flakes of paint, and what might once have been the corners of scrolls or palm leaf books. There's a quiet reverence here, not sacred but scholarly, the kind of stillness that settles in places where knowledge used to live. You wander between the shelves. Many are empty. A few still hold remnants, bundles of dried palm leaves tied together with thin strips of reed, now faded to brown. You pick one up gently. The script is too faint to read. Some of it is simply gone, eaten by time, humidity, or perhaps hungry ants with a taste for enlightenment. Still, one bundle draws your eye. It's larger, darker, the leaves stained at the edges, and tied with red thread. You lift it carefully. As you do, a puff of dust escapes, and for just a moment, the scent of smoke fills the air. Not ordinary smoke, burnt ink. You've heard of it. Old legends say there were scrolls in the Southern Library that couldn't be destroyed by time or water, but would burn if read by someone unworthy. Not evil, mind you, just unready. You untie the threads slowly. The scroll opens. The characters are clearer than expected. Bold, black, crisp. You can't read them, but you understand. They're not meant for your eyes. They're meant for your presence. And as you hold the scroll, something strange happens. The room gets warmer. The air gets heavier. The vines tremble. You close the scroll and tie it again with the red thread. The air relaxes. You place it back exactly where you found it. Behind you, a soft creak. Just wood shifting, probably.
You step back toward the door, and as you do, you notice it. A mirror. Small, oval, cracked. Lying on the corner on a raised stone shelf. You pick it up. It's heavier than expected. The surface is tarnished, but faintly you see your reflection. And behind you, a shape. A person? You spin. Nothing. Just the shelves, the moonlight, the dust. You look again. The mirror now shows only yourself. No shadow, no trick. You place it down and whisper, quietly, "I saw you." Not a challenge, not an accusation, just acknowledgement. Because sometimes seeing is all the temple asks of you. You leave the southern library behind. Its scrolls return to rest. Its stories sigh, content to remain unread. And outside, the moon dips one breath lower. The night is not yet done, and neither are you.
The exit from the southern library leads you back into a long, narrow passage. The moonlight outside is starting to wane, fading into a cooler shade of pearl gray. You sense that dawn is still a distant promise, but night is beginning to fold inward, as if preparing to slip away when you aren't looking. The corridor ahead feels older, rougher. The stone here hasn't been smoothed by countless footsteps. It's raw, coarse beneath your fingers, and the air carries the scent of stone dust and ancient sap. The slow breath of trees long since dead, but somehow still whispering in the cracks of the walls. You find yourself entering a smaller chamber, one that feels more like a hidden garden than a room. The roof has partially collapsed, and moonlight spills through the gaping hole above, illuminating a cluster of elephant carvings. They line the perimeter in a ring, their forms half buried in moss and fallen leaves, their trunks curled as if mid-motion. You step closer. Each elephant is different. One has decorative armor etched into its flank. Another wears a headdress shaped like a lotus flower. One has no adornment at all, just a solemn expression and a missing tusk. Despite the damage, their postures give them life. They're not frozen. They're simply resting, waiting. This is the Terrace of the Ghost Elephants, a name invented by travelers and whispered by locals. No official record names it as such, but those who spend enough time here speak with it a kind of affectionate fear. Not because the place is frightening, but because the elephants move. Not visibly, of course, but stories say that if you come here on a full moon and sit among the statues long enough, you'll return to find that one of them has changed, just slightly. A trunk lifted, a head turned a different way, a tail curled a different way. No one sees it happen. They just know. You walk the ring slowly, letting your hand trail across the stone hides. The moss is damp, cool to the touch. The carved eyes of the elephants are deep set, contemplative. You pause in front of the one with no tusk. Its head is lowered slightly, as if in mourning. You crouch beside it. At the base of the statue lies a small bowl, chipped and empty. Once it might have held water, or rice, or bits of fruit left as offerings. Now it holds only a single feather. White, delicate, still. You pick it up. It weighs nothing. Yet when you hold it, you feel as though something is pressing gently against your palm, some memory too old for language. You place the feather back in the bowl. You sit. Just for a while. There's no rush. The elephants keep watch. You close your eyes and begin to imagine what this place might have once looked like. alive with light and music and celebration. You see torches burning along the terrace, children climbing the carved elephants, musicians playing reed flutes by the garden walls. You see dancers with flowing scarves, monks passing slowly in long lines, their heads bowed in prayer. You even see the elephants, real ones, tethered nearby, their great ears swaying, their trunks reaching for sugarcane. You smile, and then you hear it. A sound, faint and far away, the low thrum of a drum beat. Not close, not rhythmic, just one deep tone, like someone striking the hide of a ceremonial drum. You open your eyes, silence. But something has changed. You rise slowly, your knees brushing against the mossy ground. The elephants are where they were, probably. But one, the one with the missing tusk, feels closer. You take a slow breath and bow your head in thanks. Whether they moved or not doesn't matter. They kept your secrets. You leave the terrace and step through a narrow archway behind the statues. The passage beyond slopes upward gently and turns sharply left. A soft breeze snakes through the tunnel, bringing with it the scent of ashes and faint wood smoke. At first, you assume it's just your imagination, until you round the bend and enter what can only be described as the drum wall. The room is long and rectangular, with thick stone walls covered in faded murals. The paint is barely visible now. Blues turn to gray, reds to rust, but if you squint, you can make out patterns. Lines of people carrying trays, torches, cymbals. A row of drummers standing in perfect formation. The wall to your left is different. It's smooth, too smooth, and tall. From floor to ceiling, there are no carvings, no joints, no cracks, just one monolithic stretch of dark stone. And it hums, very faintly. You step closer and press your palm against it. It vibrates, subtly, not like a machine, but like a living thing, as though something on the other side is breathing slowly against the stone. You knock, once. The vibration stops, and then returns, firmer now. Some believe this is the wall that once separated the sacred chamber from the rest of the temple, a room used only once a year during the high lunar festival, where monks would gather to chant through the night. Drummers lined this wall, striking patterns on the stone to create echoes that move through the entire temple like ripples on water. A few modern experiments tried replicating this and found that low, consistent drumming at this wall causes specific frequencies to travel along hidden ducts in the floor and ceiling. Some call it spiritual acoustics. Others say it was nothing more than ancient sound therapy, a way to lull the mind into a trance and open the spirit. You wonder if you could hear it now, just once. You take a flat stone from the ground, a loose fragment the size of your hand, and strike it gently against the wall. Thum. It echoes, not loudly, but deeply, like dropping a pebble into a vast, unseen well. You wait. Then again. Thum. The sound rolls through the chamber, brushing your ribs from the inside. You pause. Then step away. No need to wake old memories more than once. Beyond the drum wall lies a short corridor, bare, unmarked. You walk it in silence, your ears still humming with the echo. At the end, the passage splits. Left leads toward the familiar, the main galleries, the central courtyard. Right leads down into a narrow staircase that vanishes into shadow. You turn right. Because of course you do. The stairs are steep and slick with moisture. You hold the wall for balance, moving slowly, deliberately, until the air grows colder, more still. At the bottom, a chamber,
hidden, silent, unnamed. You step inside and pause. It's completely dark until your eyes adjust and you realize you're surrounded by faint glowing patterns on the walls. Not paint, not light. Lichen. Phosphorescent. Faint green, covering the carvings in delicate glowing fuzz. You walk slowly around the room. The carvings are different here. Not grand narratives or celestial dancers, but hands, hundreds of them. Left hands, right hands, large, small, some with missing fingers, all pressed into the stone, side by side, overlapping, layered. You place your hand beside one. It's almost the same size. You wonder who they were. Pilgrims, priests, builders, ghosts? Maybe all of them. Maybe none. You sit in the center of the room. The faint light shimmers across your face, and for the first time in hours, you feel truly still. The temple exhales, and so do you.
You sit in the glow of the lichen-covered chamber for what could be minutes, or an hour, or the length of a gentle breath stretched across centuries. Time here has taken on a liquid quality, less a line, more a slow-moving pool in which memories ripple, echo, and fade. Around you, the glowing handprints remain motionless, but somehow still communicative. 100 silent greetings from those who once passed through this place and left a mark, not by name, but by presence. Eventually, you rise. The air is cooler now, not cold, but dense, like you're standing within the lungs of the temple itself, just before it inhales again. The path forward is unclear, so you do what any respectful wanderer would do. You let your feet decide. They lead you through a low arch where the stone is damp, the ceiling bowed, and your shoulders brush either side of the wall. Just when you think it might narrow further, the corridor opens into a long, narrow gallery with a painted ceiling. You stop. It's hard to see at first. Only a few flakes of pigment remain, but as you move deeper into the hall, the light filtering in through narrow slits catches the remnants of black paint overhead. Not black from soot or fire, but black by intention. Layer upon layer of dark pigment once covered this entire vaulted ceiling. You lean your head back and squint. For a moment, it just looks blank. Then, you spot them. Dots. Thousands of them. Tiny white specks, arranged in swirling arcs and loops and branching lines. You realize what you're looking at. Stars. A night sky painted upside down, covering the entire ceiling like a stone-bound planetarium. The contrast has faded with time, but here and there you can still make out clusters, spirals, one larger dot surrounded by 5 smaller ones, like a royal court of stars. A depiction of the heavens. No, not just a depiction. A map.
You walk slowly, following the constellations above. There's a moment when your movement syncs with the painted sky, and you feel like you're floating through it, a traveler not of Earth but of time, a nocturnal sailor navigating an ocean of myth. There's a common theory among temple scholars that this gallery was used as a place of orientation, not geographic but cosmic. Novice monks would lie flat on their backs here during certain lunar phases, memorizing the sky as painted above them. They weren't studying stars for navigation, they were aligning themselves with divine patterns, learning to exist in harmony with the celestial body of the universe. But there's another story, a quieter one, rarely recorded, that the ceiling was painted black not to imitate the night sky, but to hide it, to block something from being seen. According to this theory, passed along through whispered oral tradition, the monks believed that there were patterns in the stars that, if stared at too long, would reveal truths not meant to be known. Not because they were dangerous, but because they were untranslatable. Not frightening, just unprocessable. The black ceiling, then, was not a map, but a veil, a cosmic curtain drawn gently over the eyes of the curious. You glance up again. Some of the dots have been scratched away, not naturally, deliberately, like someone tried to erase a constellation. One entire section has been scoured blank, the stone underneath gouged with small, desperate scrapes. Whatever was there, someone didn't want it seen again. You continue walking. At the far end of the gallery is a raised dais, circular, just a few inches off the ground. A lotus is carved at its center, though worn almost smooth now. Around the edges, etched with surprising clarity, are 12 symbols, the zodiac signs, or something close to them. Khmer astrology borrowed from both Indian and Chinese systems, blending the celestial influences of multiple cultures into a singular spiritual framework. Each symbol is paired with a single, small hole, no bigger than the tip of your finger. They look like slots. You glance around and notice several small discs scattered across the floor, flat, round stones with carvings on one side. You kneel and pick one up. It bears the shape of a bird. Another shows a wheel. A third, a sleeping figure under a tree. You realize what this was: a puzzle, or perhaps a meditative ritual. The discs were meant to be placed into the zodiac wheel, aligned with the correct sign or phase, not for divination, for contemplation. Each combination unlocking a different narrative, a different pathway of thought. You place the bird disc into one of the holes next to a symbol resembling Sagittarius. It fits with a satisfying click.
Nothing happens. Of course not. But somehow, the room feels more aware of you. You try another. The sleeping figure under Capricorn. Again, silence. Still, you feel something in your chest shift. Not physically, emotionally. A faint loosening, as though a worry you hadn't named just quietly excused itself from your ribs. You sit back on your heels and look around the room. Dust drifts lazily in the faint light. A bird coos somewhere far above, and for the first time, you notice the sound of dripping water. Steady, slow, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a sleeping deity. You rise. There's a narrow staircase off to the side, steep and worn. You take it, careful not to slip on the polished steps. It brings you into a roofed chamber, square and silent. At its center lies something unexpected. A circle of sand, perfectly formed, smooth, raked into gentle spirals, untouched by wind or time. You hesitate before stepping in. There's no sign forbidding it, no barrier, but something about the neatness of it makes you pause. It's clearly maintained, or it was, recently. You walk the perimeter, looking for any indication of its purpose. Nothing. No writing, no carving, just a room with a circle of sand. And the single stone seat facing it. You sit and wait. You don't know what for. But eventually, you notice your thoughts growing quieter, your breath deeper. You stop watching the sand and begin listening to it, which makes no sense, of course. Sand doesn't speak. And yet, you hear something, a soft hiss, as if something is moving just beneath the surface. Not alive, not crawling, just shifting. You lean forward, and there at the center of the spiral, a tiny stone the size of a bean, sitting atop the sand like a misplaced punctuation mark. You reach for it and pause, because next to the stone, drawn faintly in the sand, is that same 3-dot triangle. You pull your hand back and smile. Of course it's here too. You don't disturb it. You rise from the bench and head toward the chamber's exit. As you step through the doorway, a breeze lifts behind you. And when you glance back, the sand spiral has shifted. Just slightly. The center now empty. The stone is gone. You exhale through your nose, not surprised. Nothing in Angkor stays where you leave it. You re-enter the corridor and realize you're on a balcony now, open to the jungle, looking out over the eastern edge of the temple. The treetops shimmer in moonlight, and below the moat gleams like a forgotten mirror. The sky above is lighter than before. Not dawn, not yet, but the suggestion of it. The time of waking dreams. You lean against the stone balustrade and close your eyes. Somewhere, the apsaras are still dancing. Somewhere, a lion is stretching. Somewhere, a statue is grinning in the dark. And you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Just for this moment. Just for this breath.
The wind brushes gently against your face, cool and calm, like fingers smoothing the surface of a pond. From the balcony overlooking the temple's eastern flank, you watch as the jungle softly exhales below you. Palm trees sway slightly, their silhouettes outlined in a pale gray that hints at morning but does not yet promise it. You remain still, breathing with the stone. The temple, like you, is quiet now. Not silent, never silent, but quieter. The frogs are dozing. The insects have grown tired of their own music. The moon is softening and the air no longer hums with secrets. Just the faint awareness that something is ending and something else is waiting to begin. You step back from the balustrade, reluctantly peeling yourself from the moment. Your feet guide you through a narrow stone passage behind the open terrace. The walls here are smooth again, the kind that hum softly under your fingertips. And soon, as if summoned by your thought, you enter another hall, this one windowless, long and warm with that familiar sandstone breath. The light here comes from a single deliberate source, a small rectangular hole high above, framing a piece of sky no bigger than your hand. But it's enough. The shaft of light falls onto a rectangular slab, raised slightly off the floor. And you know even before you reach it what this is. The king's stone bed. It's not ornate. No gold, no carvings, no inlays. Just a long, flat surface smoothed by time, worn at the corners with shallow depressions at either side, maybe for offerings, maybe for arms folded in sleep. There's no inscription. The power of the object lies in what isn't here. This, they say, is where kings once slept, or not quite slept, dreamed. The legend goes that during ceremonial nights, particularly those following eclipses, the king would retreat alone to this chamber. He would lie here, unmoving, all through the night, and wait for visions, not dreams of gods or prophecy, but dreams of grain. Yes, rice. You chuckle softly, remembering that detail. There's a curious footnote in one of the older temple manuscripts, almost certainly written by a monk with a sense of humor, that describes the king's ritual dreaming not as a divine vision, but as a practical one. He would see the next harvest, the condition of the irrigation canals, and even tax compliance rates. Dreams of stomachs, the monk called them. Still, the act was taken seriously. If the king awoke and reported bad dreams, preparations were made. Fields were reinforced. Offerings were increased. Grain stores were counted twice. But if the king dreamed of plenty, it was considered a blessing of confirmation, a sign that the gods, the land, and the people were in alignment. You approach the slab.
and sit on its edge. The stone is warm, but only faintly so, like a seat that was recently occupied. You run your hands along the edges and lie back slowly, arms folded across your stomach, your eyes staring up to the square of sky above. It feels right. The stone supports your back with an honesty that no cushion ever could. The stone makes no effort to please you. It simply holds you, without condition. And for a long moment, you simply lie there. You don't dream, not yet, but your thoughts shift. You begin to imagine.
A long line of kings, not in golden robes, not in parades, but here, on this slab, one after another, over centuries, each one lying quietly in the same position, staring at the same patch of sky, hoping to see a field of rice waving in the wind, or a lotus blooming in the canal, or something, anything that would help them hold the weight of their crown for one more year. You think about the strange intimacy of a ritual like this. No priests, no prayers, just a king and the night, and a very long, very silent conversation with the future. You close your eyes, and in the silence, your thoughts begin to wander. Not in chaotic spirals, but in slow, sleepy arcs. You think of elephants, of sandals on stone, of apsaras, of the drum wall's echo. You think of the grin beneath the vanished statue, and the handprint that warmed your fingers, and the 3 dots. Always the 3 dots. You don't know what they mean, but they feel patient. They don't seem to mind waiting. You open your eyes again, unsure how long it's been. The sky in the square above has shifted from black to slate gray. The stars are gone now. In their place, a single bird. You watch it pass through the frame of the opening, wings outstretched, silent, and you smile. Because somewhere, somehow, you remember a carving of that exact moment, near the terrace, above the library, a bird in flight carved into a corner lintel, forgotten by most, unremarkable, but now etched into your mind like it had always belonged there. You sit up, stretch your arms. The slab releases you gently. You rise and press your palm against the stone once more before leaving. A quiet thank you. Then back through the hall, into another passage, this one brighter now, the lights spilling in from eastern windows, soft and low. You wander through one final corridor lined with small statues. Not gods this time, people. Simple figures, many without faces, just bodies in postures of rest. One kneeling, one seated with legs crossed, one lying on its side. The caretakers, perhaps, or the builders, or the remembered. You pause before the last figure, a woman, hands folded, head slightly tilted, as though listening to something you cannot hear. You bow your head to her, and leave. Back out into the temple's outer galleries. Back into the soft embrace of Angkor's final hour of night. The frogs have returned to their chorus, though their voices are slower now, more meditative. The trees sway gently, and the air carries a faint, metallic tang, as though dawn is already polishing the sky with copper. You cross one final causeway, your feet light now, the stone feeling less ancient, more familiar. The moat glimmers ahead, and you realize you've come full circle. But it's not the same place, and you are not the same traveler. You stop at the edge of the water. The temple behind you sighs, and in that sigh, you hear it all. The laughter of a monk who once befriended a crocodile. The hum of a star map whispered in forgotten language. The silence of a statue that may have walked away, and the rustle of elephant ears brushing the night. You dip your hand into the water. It's cold, real, present. You splash a little on your face, and for a second, You taste something on your lips. Salt. Or perhaps tears. You don't know whose, but it feels gentle. You rise, square your shoulders. The east begins to glow, and behind you, in the heart of Angkor Wat, the stone settles, as if it knows you've heard its story, and it can sleep again.
The path that leads you away from the moat curves quietly beneath low-hanging branches where the leaves shimmer in the early breath of dawn. They don't yet glisten. There is no sunlight, but a soft, pale blue hue has taken hold of the landscape. It feels like everything, stone, leaf, shadow, and breeze, is suspended in that gentle pause between night and day. You move slowly now, not from weariness, but from respect. This place, this entire labyrinth of time and moss and silence, has folded itself around you like an old storybook, and to turn the next page too quickly would feel ungrateful. You leave the causeway behind and enter a side passage you somehow missed earlier, tucked beside a crumbling gallery wall, hidden beneath a spill of vine and root. The stone is darker here, stained by rain and age, and your feet fall with a quiet echo that sounds like footsteps you haven't yet taken. The hall beyond is long, sloping ever so slightly downward, with no carvings, no figures, no windows, just walls and silence. You could turn back, but you don't. You keep going, until suddenly, as if passed through a veil, the hallway opens. You are standing at the entrance of a hidden chamber, one you're certain doesn't appear on any temple map or tour. It is round, perhaps 10 meters across, with walls rising to a domed ceiling, and every surface, every inch of it, is carved. But not with battles or gods or dancers. This space is filled with faces, thousands of them, carved into every stone block, no two alike. Some smiling gently, others solemn. A few are laughing, one or two look terrified. Most are simply present, watching, witnessing. You step inside. The temperature drops noticeably. Not cold, but hushed. You move along the inner curve of the chamber, inspecting the carvings. Each face is detailed, intimate, expressive, and small, no larger than your palm. Some are faded nearly into erasure, others remain sharp, as if carved yesterday. This is not a decorative hall. It is a memory vault. There are theories, of course, always are. One claims this chamber was a sacred space where monks would come to carve the likenesses of those they had lost, family, friends, fellow monks. They were not grand memorials, just faces, etched not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. Another fringe theory insists these are not likenesses at all, but presences, captured souls, those who walked the halls of Angkor and chose not to leave, not because they were trapped, because they didn't want to.
Just a few feet tall, with delicate branches and leaves that shimmer pale green in the early light. Its roots disappear beneath the basin. A single flower blooms at its tip, a pink-white frangipani, open, delicate, alive. You crouch beside the basin and stare into the water. The reflection shows you and the tree, and something else. Not a figure, not a shadow, just movement, the sense of presence beside you. You don't turn to look, you just nod. The breeze answers. You touch the tree's bark. It's warm, alive, new. One of the monks once wrote in a scroll now long decayed, "To plant the tree in stone is to believe that even time can grow." You stand once more and leave the courtyard. It doesn't vanish behind you, it doesn't fade, but you don't look back. You return to the outer gallery, The light is stronger now, beginning to stretch across the floors like the hands of something waking up. You walk the long colonnade, where the lions stand again in their eternal poses. One has a cobweb across its snout. You brush it away. The lion says nothing, but you get the feeling it's grateful. At the end of the corridor, you reach the final stairway that leads out, back toward the world of roads and roofs and engines and Wi-Fi signals. The temple behind you hums softly, still alive, still watching, still remembering. You stop at the top step. The moat glistens, the sky shifts, and you think, maybe the kings were right. Maybe the true dreams were always the ones about rice and sun and fields and simple, heavy silence. You take a final breath and step forward into the day.
You don't walk far, not because your legs are tired, though they are. Not because the sun has risen, though it's starting to glow behind the treetops, painting the moat with a silver blush. But because something, a feeling more than a thought, tugs at your spine and says, not yet. Not just yet. So instead of heading back toward the main path, you veer left. A crumbling stairwell calls to you like a whispered dare. You follow it, ducking under a collapsed lintel, stepping over a lazy vine that has claimed ownership of the stone. It feels like you've slipped backstage in a theater after the final curtain has fallen. The actors have left, the audience is gone, but the set remains, quietly waiting for one more scene. The stairwell ends in a narrow corridor, barely wide enough for you to pass sideways in some sections. The ceiling is low, carved, but hastily. The patterns here are not religious, not decorative. They're utilitarian, not for worship, but for maintenance. This was once a servant's passage, a way for those who tended the temple, cleaners, guards, runners, errand bearers, to move unseen behind the grandeur of Angkor's main performance. Here, the dust is thicker. No tourists' feet have stirred this path in years, maybe decades. You have the odd sensation of trespassing, not in a sacred sense, but in the way someone might stumble into a staff room behind a grand palace. Still, you press forward. You descend again, this time down a ramp rather than steps. The stone changes texture underfoot, smoother, but somehow also more cracked. At the bottom lies a low chamber, dimly lit through a slit of stone above. And in the center of the room, a pedestal. Empty, but not unimportant. You walk around it, clockwise, slowly. There's no label, of course, no plaque, just a square stone column, its top worn smooth by centuries of what? Hands? Rain? Grief? On the wall behind it, barely visible unless you crouch and tilt your head just right, is a faint outline, a sort of halo. No, not a halo. A shadow. A missing statue. You can see its ghost in the discoloration of the stone, a seated figure, legs folded, back straight, hands resting in its lap. A Buddha, most likely. But it's gone now. Removed? Stolen? Lost. Historians still argue whether it was taken during the Siamese raids, when Angkor was sacked and looted by the armies of Ayutthaya, or whether it was quietly removed during the French occupation, spirited away to some museum basement or private collection. Some say it simply cracked and was buried in the courtyard to protect its spirit. But the truth is simpler and stranger. According to local legend, shared only in hushed voices and with just enough laughter to be dismissible, the statue left on its own. It got up and walked away. Not in a dramatic flash of divine light, not with a roar or a miracle. Just one night, during the long, quiet century when Angkor was overtaken by jungle, the statue stood and left. No witnesses, no footprints. Only the shape it had imprinted into the air and the stone, and the dreams of those who slept nearby. The monks who later returned and found the empty pedestal whispered about it, then argued, then let it go. The temple was changing.
things left sometimes. That was part of the order of things. But here's the curious part. The grin stayed behind. That's what everyone says. That the grin, the subtle, barely curved smile that once played across the statue's lips, remained. Not physically, not carved, but present. In the air. In the feel of the place. And you feel it now. It's not creepy, not haunting. It's more like walking into a room where someone just finished laughing. A residual warmth, a kindness left in the furniture. You find yourself smiling without realizing it. You reach out, almost unconsciously, and touch the top of the pedestal. It's warm, which makes no sense. There's no sunlight in this room, but it is. Your fingers rest there for a long time, and suddenly you find yourself thinking about forgiveness. Not a dramatic reckoning, just small forgiveness. Like remembering to forgive your past self for not knowing what you know now. Or forgiving a friend who never apologized but probably wanted to. You blink. A tear slips down your cheek, though you're not sure why. The pedestal doesn't react. It just holds space. You sit cross-legged in front of it, mimicking the shape of what once was here, and you breathe. Long and low. The grin is still here. You feel it wrapping around your thoughts like a shawl. Eventually you stand again, lighter. The pedestal remains empty. And that feels exactly right. You take one last glance around the room. Just above the archway where you entered, something glimmers. A carving, nearly invisible unless the light hits it just so. You climb up on the base of the wall and peer closer. It's not a deity, not a guardian. It's a lotus bud. Closed, delicate, waiting. You smile again. Of course. You pass through the archway and emerge into another gallery. This one is more familiar, open to the elements, the stone sun-warmed now. You know this corner. You've stood here before. You've come full circle, once more. But there's something you didn't notice last time. A small recess in the wall just beside the doorway. Not a chamber, not a shrine, just a niche. And inside it, tucked neatly, as if left for you, a small stone foot. Carved, polished, worn at the toe. It's all that remains of a sculpture once much larger. Perhaps it belonged to the missing Buddha. Perhaps not. No way to tell. But here it is. Not displayed, not protected. Just resting in the curve of stone like it finally gave up running and decided to nap. You crouch down. And for reasons you don't question, you take off your shoe and place your own foot beside the stone one. They're nearly the same size. You exhale softly, like a sigh you forgot you were holding, and say aloud, to no one and to everything, I get it now. A breeze stirs the air. Somewhere in the galleries above, a pigeon coos, and in the far distance, the first shimmer of sunlight finds the topmost spire of Angkor Wat, gilding it with gold so faint and fragile it looks like breath. You stand, put your shoe back on, and turn to leave. But as you step out of the gallery and onto the temple grounds again, you feel it. That grin. Not left behind, not confined to the pedestal, but carried now in you. As if you've become its new bearer, a walking statue, a witness with legs,
A smile that wandered into the 21st century. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was meant to be this way all along.
You touch one face. The stone is cool, but there's warmth behind it, somehow. A presence that doesn't reach out or intrude, it just waits. You kneel in the center of the room and close your eyes, and in that stillness, you feel them. Not hear, not see, just feel. Hundreds of quiet witnesses surrounding you in stillness. It's not uncomfortable. In fact, it's one of the most peaceful feelings you've ever known. You sit for a long time, and when you open your eyes again, the light has changed. A thin beam, no wider than your hand, spills through a crack in the dome above, illuminating one face on the far side of the room. You stand, walk toward it. It's simpler than the others, unfinished almost. Just the soft curve of cheeks, an impression of closed eyes, a line for a mouth. And beneath it, a tiny inscription. Remember me as a whisper. You smile and whisper back, I will. The light shifts, and the crack above begins to brighten, a soft, golden hue starting to stir through the stone. Dawn is closer now. You leave the chamber with a final glance, your shadow cast long across the floor, crossing over hundreds of tiny, sleeping faces. You don't say goodbye. This place doesn't ask for goodbyes. It just waits to be remembered. The next corridor you enter is more familiar. You recognize carvings now, panels you passed hours ago, before you ever dreamed of grinning statues or feather offerings or rooms that whisper. The temple has led you back, but the way feels different because you're different. You walk slowly, allowing your mind to wander back through the path you've traced, through Naga bridges and black painted skies, secret scrolls and stone drums, vanished statues and footprints beside nothing. You reach a narrow set of stairs and descend into a sunken corridor, one that wraps along the inner perimeter of the temple, often overlooked. Here, the carvings are of gates, endless gates, one after another, carved in perfect perspective, each smaller than the last, receding toward a central vanishing point. Some are wide and grand, others low and crumbling, barely enough to crawl through. And above each one, a word etched in stone. Different languages, Sanskrit, Pali, Old Khmer, a few unidentifiable. You pause beside one that reads, "The threshold is not the door," and another, "To pass is not to leave," and a third, "This way in, this way out, same way." Each phrase stays with you as you walk, little riddles, little anchors. You reach the end of the hall and find the last gate carved into the wall. This one is open, not in stone, in real space, an archway with no door. Just a breeze, just light. You step through and find yourself in a courtyard you don't remember entering before. It's small, circular, the floor covered in tiles, some loose, some missing. In the center, a shallow basin holds water so still it seems painted. And growing from the middle of it, rooted directly in the stone, a small tree. A real one.
You step out into the open once more, the air shifting as if the temple itself has taken a long, sleepy breath. Morning has officially arrived, though you wouldn't know it by looking at the sky. It's still heavy with that silvery hush, the kind that makes the world feel slower, softer, suspended. A faint mist clings to the tops of the trees and to the distant spires of Angkor Wat, giving everything a ghostly glow. You follow the curve of the outer wall, hands trailing along its cool, pock-marked surface. The moss here is thick, like velvet. A few ferns have claimed the cracks, their tiny fronds twitching ever so slightly as you pass. And then you hear it. A droplet. A soft splash. You pause. Another droplet. Then another. It takes you a moment to realize it's raining. But the sky is still perfectly clear. You squint upward, no clouds, no shade, just the soft early sun melting through the upper canopy. And yet, the rain continues, gentle, irregular, almost playful. You extend your palm and feel the water strike your skin. It's cold, but not shockingly so, more like a memory than a sensation. You turn slowly on the spot. No one else is around. No water is falling from the trees above you. No leaves are shaking. No birds are scattering. But the rain keeps dripping, falling from nothing. A trick, maybe? An underground spring? No, you're standing on solid stone. You walk a little farther and realize the droplets form a faint path, like breadcrumbs for the curious. They patter lightly along a series of carved stones, leading you toward a narrow side courtyard tucked deep between two wings of the temple. You follow. Of course you do, because at this point, why wouldn't you? This temple has led you everywhere else. The courtyard is overgrown, shadowed, and surprisingly still. Vines dangle like lazy threads from the upper galleries. A single statue stands in the middle, half collapsed. You can't tell what it once depicted. Its face is long gone, its limbs crumbled, but its base remains solid. The strange rain seems to be centered here, falling only within this enclosed space. You hold out your arms. The droplets hit you now in earnest, soft and rhythmless. No thunder, no wind, just drops, one by one, as if something above is thinking. You sit down on the damp stone steps, letting the rain tap across your shoulders. You've read about things like this. Not this exact phenomenon, of course. This is too specific, too inconveniently magical. But about temples that weep, small leaks in sacred structures, architectural flaws mistaken for spiritual signs, roof cracks that, over centuries, become rituals. The sacred leak, they call it in some cultures. But this isn't a leak. This is something else. There's no sound of water striking the ground, only the droplets that land on you, like it knows you're here, like the rain is choosing you on purpose. It feels oddly comforting, not like a bath or a downpour or even a proper drizzle. This is precise, intimate. You look again at the crumbled statue and wonder, was this a ritual cleansing site? A place where monks purified themselves before ceremonies?
Some scholars believe Angkor Wat once featured elaborate hydraulic systems, not just for irrigation and flood control, but for spiritual water management. Sacred rain, created artificially through careful channeling, designed to fall at specific points within the temple. A kind of engineered blessing. Historians still argue whether this was architectural genius or just convenient natural runoff. But what if it wasn't either? What if the temple remembers? What if certain places in this massive stone memory palace call the rain back, just for a moment, just for one person? You look down. Your clothes are now flecked with water, but only faintly. The droplets don't soak, they kiss. And then, as suddenly as it began, the rain stops. Mid-drop, the last bead of water lands on the bridge of your nose. You blink. The air is still. You rise slowly, now slightly chilled but clear-headed. A little lighter. You walk to the statue and run your fingers along its base. There are tiny letters carved there,
so worn you almost miss them. Not a full inscription, just a single line, barely legible. No one remembers the clean stone. You laugh, out loud, because of course that's what it says. This temple doesn't want to be preserved. It wants to be used, touched, weathered, wept on, remembered not for its perfection, but for its presence. You walk out of the courtyard without drying yourself. Let the dampness cling. Let it mark you. You pass through another crumbling doorway and find yourself back in the outer ring, where the jungle creeps closest to the temple's skin. Here the vines are thicker, the moss louder. You hear birds now, monkeys maybe, somewhere far above. The day has properly arrived, but you're still in no rush. You reach a small alcove, half-sheltered, slightly elevated. From here, you can see the tops of the trees beyond the temple wall. They sway lazily, as if waiting for something to begin. You sit again, one last time, resting your back against warm stone. A crack runs beside your shoulder, filled with old leaves and an optimistic fern. And then you spot it, just above your head. A single carving, one you haven't seen before. Small, simple. It's a figure, just the outline of a person, walking. That's it. Not bowing, not meditating, not fighting demons or praying to deities. Just walking. You stare at it for a long time and feel something settle inside your chest. A quiet realization. This temple, this whole vast, elaborate monument built with mathematical precision and cosmic ambition, is, at its core, a place for passing through. Not conquering, not controlling, just moving, learning, remembering, smiling. You stand again, stretch, look once more toward the trees beyond the wall. And as you turn to leave, you feel the echo of that phantom rain on your shoulders. Still cold, still perfect. It lingers, as if the temple isn't quite done with you yet. But you smile, because maybe you're not done with it either.
The jungle edge presses near now. You can hear it breathing. Not literally, of course, but in that low, rustling way trees exhale when no one's looking. The temple's formal structures thin out around you. Fewer spires, less symmetry. It's as if Angkor itself is exhaling, stretching into the wild. You find yourself walking along an overgrown path, one that seems more instinct than intention. The stones beneath your feet are uneven, scattered with fallen leaves and tree roots that have crept in from the forest, reclaiming what was once so carefully laid. Ahead, through the mottled light, a peculiar shape rises, low, rectangular, utterly plain compared to the ornate carvings and tiered towers you've left behind. You approach. It's a platform, a simple moss-covered slab of sandstone raised only slightly above the ground, no bigger than a single room. No pillars, no statues, no offerings, just a flat surface. But it's oddly inviting, as if it's been waiting. You step up and realize what you found. This was a bed. A royal one, if the stories are true. The king's bed. Not his personal sleeping quarters. He had those in abundance, one for each phase of the moon, if you believe some of the more imaginative scholars. But a ceremonial platform where, once a year, the king would lie down beneath the stars, face up, still in full robes while the priests chanted and the heavens judged. A ritual rest. To realign himself with the cosmos. To ask for rain, or forgiveness, or favor. No one quite agrees. Historians still debate whether this tradition was spiritual or political, Was it a rite to renew divine authority? Or just a performance for the people? A reminder that even a king must lie down sometimes. You lie down on the stone, and surprisingly, it's not as cold as you expect. Smooth, yes, solid, but it holds a kind of residual warmth, as if the stone remembers centuries of backs, shoulders, spines, kings, servants, wanderers, each one carrying hopes, regrets, secrets, sweat. Above you, the canopy parts just enough to let the sky peek through. Still no clouds, just pale blue deepening towards something richer. The light is shifting again, into that final hour before morning becomes day. You breathe, and it echoes. It's strange, lying in a place once used for such lofty rituals and realizing how incredibly ordinary it feels. You slept in stranger spots. Still, your mind drifts. What did the king think about flat on this stone? Did he wonder if his enemies were plotting against him? Did he worry about harvests or rainfall or border disputes? Or did he, just like you, stare at the sky and wonder whether the stars were really as still as they looked? Maybe he thought about rice. That sounds silly, but it makes sense. Rice was everything: economy, ceremony, survival. Kings prayed for rain not because they wanted lush gardens, but because without rain there was no rice, and without rice there were no people, and without people, well, who's left to call you king? You shift a little. A few ants scurry near the edge of the slab, minding their own business. One pauses, climbs onto your forearm, then continues on. You don't flick it off. You're part of the scene now, a temporary fixture in a very old story. From your horizontal vantage point, you can see parts of the temple you hadn't noticed before. Distant spires peeking over the trees like shy sentinels. A carving of Garuda, half hidden by creepers. A broken pillar shaped like a lotus stem that never quite bloomed.
And something else. A bell. Faint. Far away. Not metal. Not sharp. Just a soft wooden thunk, like someone striking a hollow drum once, then again, after a long pause. You sit up and listen. There it is again. Not rhythmic, not ritual, just a sound, a reminder. You rise and step off the stone. There's a trail now, narrow and partly hidden by vines. It curls toward the sound and you follow, brushing aside leaves and stepping lightly as if not to wake whatever dreams the trees are having. The trail opens into a grove. And there, at the far edge, beneath the largest tree you've seen all morning, sits a small wooden frame. Like a swing, but without a seat. Suspended from the top is a single carved beam of rosewood, round and dark with age. A temple drum. The kind once used to signal prayer time, or call the monks to meal, or warn of danger. But this one is cracked, split neatly down the center, like a seed that never sprouted. And yet, you hear the sound again, the thunk. No one is here, but the air vibrates faintly, like the drum is remembering its purpose, or dreaming it. You sit beside it, and wait. Nothing happens, and that's okay. Because the real power of this moment isn't the drum, it's the space around it, the clearing, the silence, the unseen history that wraps around this humble instrument like incense smoke. You rest your palm against the drum. It's smooth, worn, quiet. And then faintly, you see something scratched into its side, not carved, not painted, just scratched. A simple phrase, barely legible. No echo is ever lost. You sit with that for a while, and then you do something absurd. You raise your hand and tap the drum. Once,
lightly. The sound is soft, hollow, but it carries. Outward, into the grove, toward the trees, toward the temple, toward wherever such sounds do when they're not quite real and not quite forgotten. You listen, and somewhere, very faintly, a bird answers. You laugh, softly, then stand. The path now winds gently toward the edge of the temple grounds. You can feel it, the shift, the thinning of sacred space, the approach of the ordinary. The jungle grows louder, daytime creatures are waking up, and so are you. But not abruptly, not jarringly. You carry the quiet with you, the grin, the rain, the shadow of a missing statue, the sound of a drum that remembers. Everything is with you, even now, especially now. You walk slowly, deliberately, and just before the final turn that leads out of the temple, you stop. Look back, not to say goodbye, just to remember the shape of it, the way the spires align with the trees, the way the moss climbs like prayer, the way silence has its own vocabulary if you learn how to listen. And then, like the statue that once stood, you turn and walk on. Not away, just...
And so, with the jungle at your back and the temple behind you, you follow the final stones of the causeway, each one worn by centuries of sandals, bare feet, royal processions, curious wanderers, and perhaps one or two confused goats. The stone beneath you still holds warmth from the night before, though the day has begun to stretch fully awake. A light breeze plays through the trees ahead, ruffling the leaves like a sleepy sigh. And you know, your night at Angkor Wat is ending, but it won't leave you. You pass under one final stone arch, half collapsed, but still holding together. There's something poetic in that. The way these stones cling to each other, not out of force, but out of long practiced patience. Everything here leans on something else. As you reach the wide bridge that crosses back over the moat, the world feels bigger again, less enchanted, less whispered. The frogs are silent now. The lotus flowers in the water have begun to open to greet the day. And yet, you don't feel like you're returning from a place. You feel like you've been carried. You stop for a moment on the bridge and glance back. From this distance, Angkor Wat looks unreal, too balanced, too vast, too perfect, like a painting or a trick of perspective. The way the towers line up so precisely, the way everything seems to rise from the water like a mirage made of discipline and devotion. And you remember, suddenly, that Angkor Wat was not always a Buddhist site, that originally it was built as a Hindu temple devoted to Vishnu. And before that, well, even earlier, the land belonged to the spirits of the forest, the river gods, and the cloud herders. No matter how far back you go, the place was never empty. That's the strange thing about Angkor. It's one of the largest religious structures in the world, yet it never feels crowded. Even when filled with tourists in bright shirts and selfie sticks, it somehow contains more silence than sound, more memory than chatter. It's as if the stones absorb everything and hold it. You cross the bridge and step onto the outer road. The modern world starts to leak back in. Motorbikes somewhere in the distance, a tour guide explaining something to a group with matching hats. The spell should break now. This should be the point where you check your phone, stretch your back, say something like, well, that was cool. But you don't. Instead, you notice something fluttering near your shoe, a single withered leaf, shaped almost like a lotus petal, deep brown with tiny holes that form almost symmetrical patterns. You crouch and pick it up, half expecting it to crumble, but it holds. It's dry, but not brittle. You turn it over in your palm. There's a small smudge on the underside. A line, a swirl, a mark. Maybe it's dirt. Maybe it's writing. You smile, because it doesn't matter. It's a gift. One last relic from the temple. Something too small to go in a museum, too quiet to ever be mentioned in a documentary. But it's yours. You tuck it into your pocket. And then, as you begin the slow walk back toward the visitor center, your feet move without rush. You're not just leaving, you're digesting. Like you've eaten a strange and heavy dream. Your body remembers the corridor of echoes, the apsaras who smiled from every corner, the rain that fell from a cloudless sky. Your arms recall the cool pedestal of the vanished statue. Your eyes still carry the outline of a forgotten carving. And your heart is somewhere near that cracked temple drum, still vibrating, ever so faintly. You pass a row of stone boundary markers now, little sentinels whose job is simply to say, "You've crossed into the outside again." You pat one as you pass. "Thanks for letting me in," you think. And then you're walking the sandy road, surrounded by trees on both sides. A few butterflies float lazily in the early light. You're not really paying attention to where you're going, because your mind is still there, inside, among the galleries and the towers and the sleeping gods. You wonder, did they notice you? Do the guardian lions speak of you now? Is your step recorded somewhere in the grooves of the stones? Will some future visitor, brushing dust from a railing, feel your grin lingering faintly in the air? That's the secret of these ancient places. You never just visit them. You add to them. One more breath. One more gaze. One more pair of bare feet whispering down the hall. You're part of it now. A small part, but a part. And as you near the edge of the forest, the sun finally clears the tallest trees and washes everything in amber. You feel it warm in your face, drying the phantom rain still ghosting across your shoulders. You pause one last time, close your eyes, and whisper under your breath, "I was here." Not for history books, not for Instagram, just for yourself. Because sometimes, knowing you walked softly through something timeless is enough. You inhale, exhale, and keep walking, still smiling. And now, as the path settles behind you and your breath begins to slow, let the memory of Angkor Wat soften at the edges, like an old silk banner, gently folding in on itself. You don't need to hold on tightly to every image. Let them drift, lazily, like mist through morning trees, the apsaras twirling silently on stone walls, the whispering corridors and secret courtyards, that phantom rain cool on your skin, falling from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Feel your shoulders loosen, your thoughts begin to stretch, uncoil, and blur. The temple is still there, of course. It always will be, tucked somewhere in the warm fog between memory and dream. A place that doesn't vanish when you turn away, but hums quietly in the background, like a lullaby you once knew in another lifetime. The air now is thick with peace. Even the jungle has quieted. The birds have tucked their songs beneath their wings. The trees sigh one last time. The stones settle in their ancient sleep. And you've walked far tonight. Not in steps, maybe, but in wonder. Through carvings and corridors. Through myths and shadows. Through stories carved not just in walls, but in water and wind. Let your breath move slower now. Let your jaw unclench. Let your mind, like the temple, be held by silence. Because nothing is chasing you here. Not time, not thought, not even sleep. Only the stillness. Only the stone. Only the gentle, endless whisper of a place
that has seen empires rise and fall and rise again, all beneath a sky that never once hurried. So rest now. Let go. Let your body grow heavy, like earth returning to earth. Let your mind dissolve into the warm, golden haze that lives just beyond thought. You're safe. You're seen. You're home. For now, in the hush of Angkor.